Welcome to this special edition of I-24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek. Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar is dead. Not only is Israel a safer place, but the entire Middle East region and the world. Over the next 2 hours, we're going to discuss what Sinwar's killing means for the ongoing war with Hamas, the conflict with Hezbollah and Lebanon, even the impending Israeli attack on Iran. This is a historic moment in the region. But first, let's take a look at how it all happened. After a year-long manhunt, the terror chief was killed in a routine IDF operation in southern Gaza. The details emerging truly extraordinary for the average soldiers who, to their surprise, brought about Sinwar's demise. Here's more.
Israeli troops had been hunting Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, for over a year after he masterminded the deadly October 7th massacre in Israel. Sinwar had reportedly spent much of that time hiding in Gaza's tunnels, surrounded by bodyguards and a human shield of hostages taken from Israel. Ultimately, he was killed in a confrontation with an Israeli patrol in Rafah, southern Gaza. The Israel Defense Forces said a unit from the 828th Bislamach Brigade was patrolling Tal al-Sultan on Wednesday when 3 terrorists were spotted and engaged by Israeli troops. All 3 were eliminated, but initially, nothing about the firefight stood out. It wasn't until the following morning that the body of one of the men was found to strongly resemble Sinwar. Due to concerns about possible booby traps, only part of his finger was removed and sent to Israel for DNA testing. His body was eventually extracted and brought to Israel later that day. Sinwar's body was found with a flak jacket, a gun, and 40,000 shekels. No hostages were with him, which suggests that either he was moving unnoticed or had lost many of his guards.
Yahya Sinwar's life ended when he was beaten, chased down, running for his life, not commanding his organization and looking after himself only. This is a clear message to all of our enemies. The IDF will reach anyone who tries to harm the citizens of Israel or its security forces, and will settle the score with them.
Drone footage released by the Israeli military on Thursday showed Sinwar's final moments inside a mostly destroyed building. In the video, a drone flies through an open window, revealing a man with his head covered, sitting in a debris-strewn room. The man throws a stick at the drone before the video cuts out. Early Thursday, graphic images circulating on social media showed a man with features similar to Sinwar, who had suffered severe head wounds. While initial reports couldn't confirm his identity, Israeli officials said they were increasingly confident they had killed him. By Thursday evening, DNA tests confirmed that the body was indeed Yahya Sinwar.
Yahya Sinwar is dead. He was killed in Rafah by the brave soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. While this is not the end of the war in Gaza, it's the beginning of the end. To the people of Gaza, I have a simple message. This war can end tomorrow. It can end if Hamas lays down its arms and returns our hostages.
This is a historic week, and we have quite a bit to discuss on the significance of Sinwar's death. So to give us some more insight, I'm joined in studio by Yaakov Lapin, military and strategic affairs analyst at Miriam Institute and Jewish News Syndicate, as well as the host of the Lapin Assessment of Patreon. We also have our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Oseron, as well. Now, Yaakov, as we're learning the details of this not targeted assassination, but still killing of Sinwar, the details are truly remarkable, as it seems these soldiers were surprised when they went into this house and they found that it was Sinwar who was in there, that they killed in this routine operation. What does this say about the ongoing activity that's happening right now inside Gaza?
Well, it tells us that there was an element of luck here, but it wasn't really down to luck, because at the end of the day, there was intelligence that Sinwar and the senior Hamas leadership were in the Rafah area after fleeing there from Khan Yunis. When the IDF began operating in Khan Yunis, they moved into Rafah together with civilians. Then they tried to hide out underground, and then they saw the IDF was closing in on them. Now, the Israeli decision to keep up those operations in Rafah day in and day out, and to box where they thought Sinwar could be, is what eventually enabled this encounter. So it was a chance encounter, but it was a result of a very deliberate policy, defense, military, and political decision to remain in Rafah and to keep the pressure up and it paid off. So this is obviously at the tactical level an incredible achievement, but at the strategic level, as you've said, I think this is part of the beginning of rearranging fundamentally the entire region. First and foremost, the Gaza Strip, but I think the shockwaves are going to spread out, weaken the entire Iranian access. Sinwar was the main pillar of Iran's strategy to surround us from the south. And now that he's out of the picture, I think many things are going to start changing much faster in the Gaza Strip in Israel's strategic favor.
And we're going to talk more about all of this ramifications throughout the Middle East later. But Ariel, I want an update from you as we continue to see some of these details emerging. It seems that Sinwar was above ground. He was not surrounded by hostages, as many people had thought he would constantly be. And he had some cash as well as an UNRWA ID on his body. So does this indicate that he was perhaps trying to flee? Was he perhaps getting ready? What's the significance of the UNRWA ID as well?
Right. So I'll start with the issue of the tunnels and the hostages, because it is believed that the last 6 Israeli hostages that were murdered in a tunnel in Tel Sultan in Rafah, the same area where Sinwar was found, were believed to be his human shield. And when Israeli forces approached the area, they were eliminated, and then he fled. Not clear whether at that point he fled out of Rafah or just somewhere else in the vast underground tunnel of Gaza's southernmost city, a city where the international community implored Israel not to operate, and once it entered, it has been continuing to pressure to stop. I think, as Yaakov described, this operation in Rafah was critical to set the stage to enable such an achievement, a strategic achievement by the IDF. As for what was found on the person of Sinwar and the 2 men who accompanied him, one of them was the battalion commander of Tel Sultan in Rafah, so another senior field commander taken away. Yes, 40,000 shekels. It's not surprising that he would walk around with that amount of money, because at the end of the day, we know that all Hamas leadership cares about is for them, is their own survival, their own to maintain the ability to get out of danger at a moment's notice. As for the UNRWA document, it's not clear if it's original or not, and it wasn't allocated to him, but to one of the people in his surroundings. Again, this shows once again how UNRWA is an organization that wasn't just a front for Hamas, but it was perhaps even an organ of Hamas in some way or another, that they managed to issue such documents. Again, we don't know the authenticity of it, but we do know that numerous UNRWA officials were engaged, were part of Hamas, including one of the senior Hamas commanders who was a teacher in UNRWA. So that's not a surprise. What is a surprise, and what is being highlighted in Arab media, is the fact that he was armed like a regular soldier. He had the tactical vest, he had the grenades, and that could explain what he's been up to over these past few weeks, because according to the forces who identified him, they were moving from building to building trying to maintain their cover, but he not only was he not identified as Sinwar, he was identified as a regular combatant at that point with his face covered. And so only after they eliminated him and removed his face covering did they realize that this was Sinwar. That shows how much on the ground he was participating, and Hamas and other Palestinian factions are trying to use this in terms of praising Sinwar, trying to show how he was a fighter to the end, despite being caught after hiding and continuously hiding from Israeli forces until his final moments.
And I would just add, one of the reasons why he may have had that tactical gear on him was perhaps to not stick out, to blend in, and to look like a regular terrorist. I think that may have been part of his hiding tactics.
And it's interesting, the fact that he's above ground in the first place, and for multiple days as well. When we're talking about Israeli intelligence, Yaakov, you say that this does show that the Israeli intelligence knows that he was there. But Bianca, just as you both brought up, Israel was told repeatedly, do not go into Rafah. And what did Israel find in Rafah? Not only hostages, rescued some hostages, found others that were murdered inside Rafah, and now the Hamas leader as well. So what does this say about Israel's obligation or not obligation to listen to some of this international pressure?
Well, I don't know about obligation, but I know about possibility. Israel can choose to go its own way and has chosen to go its own way until a certain point. At the end of the day, it can't just close its ears to the international community, specifically the U.S., of course. The latest is that the U.S. is now saying that in order to continue its military support of weapons to Israel, aid needs to be allowed into Gaza. There is a factor of the U.S. support to Israel here and the U.S. voice. That said, Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's military heads have said that at the end of the day, the main issue for Israel is Israel's interests. So it will listen until a certain point. And I just want to add that the UN did come out and say that card had absolutely nothing to do and was completely irrelevant, had nothing to do with Sinwar. They are always pointing a finger at Israel for spreading fake news. That's what they said Israel was doing at this time. But the fact was that this card was found next to Yahya Sinwar. And I want to add to something that you mentioned, Yaakov. You seemed quite positive about how this is going to impact the Middle East and the region. I think that it's absolutely a strategic and symbolic and practical win for Israel, but it's not a victory that comes without what comes next, a question of what comes next. There's a power vacuum that's been established right now because the leader of Hamas has been taken out. There's been Khalid Masha has come in to take over, but he doesn't have the profile that Sinwar has. So there is a leadership vacuum, there is an opportunity, but it doesn't mean a long-term victory unless something is planned for what is going to come after Hamas, unless there is a diplomatic conversation starting.
Well, you mentioned Yahya Sinwar's profile, so let's dig into that a little bit more, give our viewers a better understanding for exactly who Yahya Sinwar was. This is the mastermind behind the October 7th massacre, but he had been a prominent figure in Hamas for decades, even gaining followers while inside Israeli prisons for years. Our senior correspondent, Bianca Zanini, takes a look at the terror leader's life.
The last moments of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's life, the images and the man shot by an IDF drone in Gaza. The mastermind behind the October 7th massacre in Israel, and of decades of terrorist activities, warned Israel and the world of his plans for years.
If the entire world won't move, take action and stop Israel, this will be the cause for the eruption of a major religious war in the region. It threatens a status of unrest and chaos in the Middle East and the entire world. We will come to you, God willing, in a roaring flood. We will come to you with an endless number of rockets. We will come to you in a flood of soldiers without limit. We will come to you with millions of our nation, tide after tide.
Sinwar was a central figure in Hamas in Gaza, known by Israel for decades for his obsessive levels of secrecy and security precautions. A man dedicated to the armed fight against Israel's existence, who learned Hebrew and studied his enemy for years. Inside the Strip, Sinwar was also widely known for his ruthlessness towards Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. In 1988, he was arrested for planning the abduction and murder of 2 Israeli soldiers and 4 Palestinians. But despite being sentenced to consecutive life terms in Israel, in 2011 he was released in a prisoner swap as one of over 1,000 Palestinians released for one single Israeli soldier held in Gaza.
It's really an indescribable feeling. There is no doubt that this is a nationalistic event par excellence. It is one of the big strategic events in the history of our people's cause in the past years.
Sinwar rose to prominence and was elected as Hamas leader in Gaza in 2017, a central figure in the Gaza war and in the on-again, off-again hostages for ceasefire negotiations. Sinwar took over as the top leader of the organization after political leader Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in July this year. Staying in Gaza, believed to have been giving orders from underground, Sinwar was seen as a hero for many Palestinians who mourned the leader's death.
They used to say that he was underground. I was proud but also sad because he was martyred. I cried for him. I was sad for him because he was a part of the resistance. He was not hiding, as they said.
For Israel and for the West, his death marked the end of a terrorist mastermind who was willing to sacrifice civilians, including his own people's lives, for his cause.
Now, leaders around the world have been reacting to Sinwar's death. Some grateful to Israel for the terror mastermind's demise, while others expressing condolences for the loss of a, quote, martyr. Now, it shouldn't come as a surprise that those statements came from the Turkish Foreign Ministry while holding talks with Hamas representatives. And similar sentiments coming from Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, who said, quote, the news of the assassination and martyrdom of Mr. Yahya Sinwar was painful for the world's freedom seekers. Now, someone who has yet to even acknowledge Sinwar's death is United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, who didn't mention the terror leader's killing at all and instead tweeted about the Gaza crisis and humanitarian situation. Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, called Guterres out, accusing the UN chief of leading an extreme anti-Israel and anti-Jewish agenda, just as Guterres didn't declare Hamas a terror organization following the October 7th attack that Sinwar was behind. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden says Sinwar's death provides an opportunity for a, quote, day after in Gaza that does not involve Hamas. And UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying, today my thoughts are with the families of Sinwar's victims. The UK will not mourn his death. Well, Yaakov, earlier you were talking about this positive reaction that this could have throughout the Middle East, but specifically with an end possibly to the war in Gaza. That's something that the Western leaders want this to kind of spark this chain reaction. But what are your thoughts about this? Is the end imminent following Sinwar's death, or is there still a ways to go?
I don't think it's imminent, but I think it's closer than it has been at any point since the start of this war. And really, we have to define the objectives, as Bianca was saying. And I think Israel's objective is, first of all, not only to degrade and destroy the terror army that Hamas built in Gaza and to make sure that it can never again launch a ground invasion and commit mass murder, but that it does not reform. And this objective of making sure it does not reform rests on a combination of a future autonomy in the Gaza Strip, which will be rational, non-Islamist, interested in the welfare of the Gazan people, and freedom of operation for the IDF, continuous freedom of operation, because nobody else will be able to ensure that Hamas does not rebuild. And I think those are the two long-term objectives. And I think that Israel took a major step by removing Sinwar from the picture. That is the correct order. It can't be done in any other order. It can't be that we start talking about a diplomatic, political solution while there's still a terror army operating in Gaza. Nobody in Gaza would cooperate with Israel under those circumstances. But when Gazans see that Israel is serious about the future and making sure that Hamas does not return, then I think Gazans will start cooperating with a post-Hamas future. And I think part of that actually rests with setting up a limited temporary military administration to stop Hamas, what's left of it, from stealing the aid, having Israel directly distribute that aid until an autonomy can be set up. I think that's the right order of things. It's kind of classic also counterinsurgency doctrine. And I think that, that's the direction things should go in. But in terms of Sinwar's elimination, absolutely critical, totally necessary in order to start thinking about not only the future of Gaza, but also the more rational, moderate bloc in the Middle East. The Saudis and the Emiratis and the Bahrainis, all of these powers, and even I'm sure that in Cairo quietly, are very glad that this Islamist jihadist mass murderer is out of the picture, and we can start thinking about a post-Hamas future in the Gaza Strip and in the Middle East.
We might not be hearing those reactions coming out of some of those more moderate Arab countries, but with Sinwar's death, it is a safer place for the entire region. I think that's safe to say. Bianca, I want your thoughts on some of these reactions that we're hearing right now, though.
Right. I want to add, since the war began, really, the main decisions were coming by Hamas, were coming out of Gaza. Yes, we had Hania outside in Qatar, but the main decisions were made by Sinwar in Gaza. And Sinwar was difficult to talk to for several reasons. Practical, ideological, but if we just look at the practical reasons, I mean, he was not using any electronics for a long time. He was relying on handwritten messages passed on to members that he trusted that were then passed on. I mean, it could be days and weeks between answering and responding back and forth. So, and of course, he was hiding in tunnels and from Israeli bombs. So there was like a very big practical on the ground difficulty when it came to Sinwar. And then, of course, there was the ideological part. He was a hardliner, very, very dedicated to the war, to the fight against what he would say was the Israeli occupation. And his the person who's taken over, Khalid Mashal, he is also a hardliner. But again, as I mentioned, he doesn't have the profile that Sinwar had. And the decisions now, Mashal is outside of Gaza. So the decisions of what happens on the ground in Gaza, it's a little bit unclear who's going to take over that and what that will mean. So on the one hand, there is a possibility of this weakening of the Hamas leadership helping reach a deal, helping take the next step, as Yaakov was saying. There are also risks with this. I mean, we are looking at potentially a shattered, split leadership chain of command in Gaza, where it's unclear who makes the decision, it's unclear who we talk to, it's unclear what the consequences can be for commanders who take decisions regarding hostages, for instance, into their own hands. So there is a risk involved in this as well. That said, I do agree with Yaakov that this was an important and crucial step in order to talk about a future after Hamas.
Well, another reaction that we're getting as well is from the Palestinian Authority president, Mahmoud Abbas, who praised Sinwar for being a great national leader and used his killing to urge Palestinian national unity. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Fatah activist and chairman at the Jerusalem Development Fund, Samer Senijlawi. Samer, thank you for joining us right now. I want to hear from you how Fatah, which is Mahmoud Abbas's party, which controls the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, how is the party reacting right now to Sinwar's death?
Well, let me tell you that, unfortunately, President Abbas has been on the silent move from the beginning of the war, on the 7th of October. He hasn't found any occasion to address his people at the time that there is catastrophe that is happening in Gaza. I mean, a leader of the Palestinian people where there are 50, 60,000 victims who lost their lives in Gaza, and he couldn't even find 5 minutes to address his people once, but he chooses on other occasions to make statements. He is totally disconnected from the reality. Every time he opens his mouth, he brings catastrophe to the Palestinian people. And I don't think he represents the Palestinian people. He has been always seen in the polls as a person that gets 90% request from his people to leave their life and maybe to leave the whole West Bank and just, depart our lives. Now, on the assassination of Sinwar, I think this assassination couldn't achieve two important things. And I don't think that it might help in achieving them. I think maybe it will distance us from achieving them. One is the release of hostages. And I agree with the opinions that have been said previously in this panel that, yes, Sinwar was difficult to be contacted, but at least there was an address to be contacted. The Egyptians, the Qataris, knew that they are talking to Sinwar, that there is somebody who takes decision, that there is somebody who is controlling the information about who is hiding the 101 Israeli hostages. Now there is nobody to talk. So, and more important, there is no one to put on his shoulders the responsibility of their lives. Now they are left in the air, and I don't think that his absence will help into bringing a deal that will release the hostages. The second issue, his assassination also will not help ending the suffer of 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Despite the fact that if we go back to the pictures that were behind the Israeli chief of staff 1.5 or 2 weeks ago, we have seen that all the leadership, the military leadership of Hamas has been assassinated. Only one person was under a question mark, which was Sinwar. So now, when he is assassinated, now the big question is, there is nobody left. Why does the war continue? Hamas has lost completely its leadership on all levels, from the top of the pyramid to the field commanders. Now there is no military body that is called Hamas military wing. And we can see the chaos inside Gaza. So Hamas regime has ended. Hamas military capabilities has ended. Why does the war continue? I think we should focus now, all of us, all those who are trying to restore back the stability of the region, to see how we can now find a way to bring back the hostages back and end the war and restore life in Gaza. It's the continuation of war does not have any targets now, not military. There hasn't been, or at least when it comes to the Israeli Prime Minister, any horizons for a political development. I think it should be back on our agenda. We are expecting some change to happen. I'm very worried about how things are going to develop. I'm very worried that the 101 Israeli hostages and the civilians in Gaza will continue to pay a price for a real chaos that now is prevailing in Gaza.
There could certainly be some negative ramifications from an assassination like this, as well as the positive ones that we hopefully will see on the ground as well. Samer Sanijwali, thank you so much for giving us your insight when it does come to exactly what's happening with the reactions from the Fatah movement right now. Now, we do have to go out for a quick break here on I-24 News Now, but we will be back again in just a few minutes with more updates on all of the developments surrounding the death of Yahya Sinwar. Please stay with us here on I-24 News.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish World Weekly. I'm Caleb Ben David, and each week we're going to bring you the latest from the Jewish world, from politics to religion, entertainment to the latest trends, and everything in between. Join me each week as we explore the global Jewish diaspora. Don't miss Jewish World Weekly only on I-24 News.
welcome back to this special edition of I-24 News. Now, as we come on the air right now, there is live images of smoke in Beirut, in the capital of Lebanon. That is what you're taking a look at right now. Now, we're going to bring you an update as to the exact developments of the IDF's activity inside Lebanon, but this does follow a major move from this morning when Hezbollah directly targeted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Caesarea, launching a drone attack from Lebanon. Neither Netanyahu or his wife Sarah were home during the attack, and no one was injured. But the IDF confirms a building in the area was hit, but doesn't specify if it was part of Netanyahu's residence or not. Now, in a casual video in response, Netanyahu is seen pretty cool and collected, stating nothing will deter Israel from attacking Iran's proxies.
Prime Minister, how is it going?
Well, 2 days ago, we took out Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist mastermind whose goons beheaded our men, raped our women, burnt babies alive. We took him out, and we're continuing our battle with Iran's other terrorist proxies. We're going to win this war.
So will something deter you?
No.
Throughout the day, Hezbollah has also launched more than 200 rockets at northern Israel, one of them killing a 50-year-old man in Acre from the explosion. For the latest, let's go live to our correspondent, Zach Anders, who joins us live in Haifa. Zach, I'm curious what we've heard coming from Hezbollah at this point, claiming responsibility. And meanwhile, these images that we're seeing right now coming out of Beirut, how is Israel responding?
Hi, Nicole. Good afternoon. First off, for the viewers at home, wanted to extend my apologies. I know we've been off air during some pretty critical moments. Nobody more frustrated than us. But I just wanted to let you at home know that we are seeing the messages. We're doing our best to try and get content and get the news out to you as it's happening. But we appreciate the messages you've been sending us. As of now, from what we see on the ground in Beirut, this is following another evacuation notice, the IDF Arabic spokesperson posting and sending messages online. This is not like they're dropping pamphlets like before or directly pinging messages to people's individual phones. Instead, a social media call saying evacuate from 2 buildings in Beirut in the southern suburb, Dahia, which in Arabic just translates to southern suburb. From this, then we see strikes in this area and in a separate neighborhood where an evacuation call was not ordered. We don't have very much about who the intended target was at this point, but it follows, as you mentioned, a very busy day here in northern Israel. One man in his 50s is dead from shrapnel from a Hezbollah attack. 14 other casualties with varying conditions from light and moderate to more critical, more severe wounds from these shrapnel injuries by the more than 100 rockets that have been fired here. But of course, the banner headline right now is another instance of a Hezbollah drone penetrating Israeli air defenses. And again, I want to stress that the main thing here that should be the most concerning is the fact that Hezbollah still, by all accounts and by all available evidence, has the ability to pilot these drones remotely. One of the lessons we've learned from the Ukraine war is that sometimes these drones, if they're modified, can include SIM cards that then bounce signals off of local cell towers. So if they get their hands on some Israeli cell network SIM cards, they can get an uplink and use Israel's own cell network to be able to send video feeds back. Now, I can't say for certain whether or not that's what was used and employed in this morning's attack, but it is showing and the evidence of the last few days worth of drone attacks, one hitting the IDF base, killing 4 soldiers, wounding 60 others, well south of Haifa, and another instance again of a drone getting through Israeli air defense systems and targeting the Prime Minister's house. We don't have a clear picture as to the extent of the damage. This is obviously locked down, this area by Israeli authorities. But all signs right here, Nicole, point to the fact that Hezbollah still has the ability to pilot these drones remotely well inside Israeli airspace and direct these drones at specific targets. And they know what they're targeting. They know what's on the ground. So clearly their intelligence operations still well together. And their drone operations still able to carry out attacks this deep inside Israeli territory.
Certainly could be a concerning development, as you're mentioning, Zach. We'll be coming to you for more updates throughout the broadcast there from northern Israel. Thanks for your coverage on the ground. Now, following Sinwar's killing, Hezbollah declared a transition to a new and escalatory phase in the war. But the IDF is saying Hezbollah's capabilities are shrinking. The Lebanese government is starting to openly criticize Hezbollah. Here's more details in this report.
Tensions continue to escalate between Israel and Hezbollah as the Iran-backed terror group vows to intensify its operations following the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. But the Israeli military says that Hezbollah has suffered considerable losses since the start of the conflict and is continuing to shrink.
There is great damage. An entire chain of command is being wiped out. Hezbollah is hiding its fatalities. It is hiding dead commanders. We estimate that around 1,500 Hezbollah operatives have been killed, and our estimates are conservative. I assume there are more we don't know of, killed in many airstrikes.
At the same time, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati voiced rare criticism of the terror group that has a stranglehold over his country.
What is happening now should be a lesson to all Lebanese parties that the Lebanese representative in foreign conflicts is the solution, and that the sovereignty of the Lebanese state over its land is the solution to all existing problems.
Hezbollah began attacking northern Israel a day after Hamas's October 7, 2023 onslaught on the country's south, saying it was doing so in support of the Gaza-based terror group. But after nearly a year of cross-border attacks, Israel launched a major offensive against Hezbollah at the end of September, after killing the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in an airstrike. While it is not yet clear if Nasrallah's and Sinwar's deaths will bring a ceasefire on the Israel-Lebanon border, the IDF continues to conduct ground and air operations in Lebanon to dismantle Hezbollah's capabilities in order to allow 60,000 displaced Israelis to safely return to their homes in the north.
Well, still with me now in studio is Bianca Zanini, Yaakov Lapin, and Ariel Osron as well. As we're sitting here in studio talking about these developments coming out from Lebanon, the government itself, Yaakov, pretty significant statements coming out and possibly showing a changing of tides when it comes from the messaging inside Lebanon.
Absolutely. There is a direct connection between the weakening of Hezbollah's military power and the boldness of non-Hezbollah Lebanese officials, political forces, willing to speak out against the Iranian Hezbollah radical kidnapping of their country. There's no other way to achieve this change. It has to be done, first of all, at the military level, in order for them to have the courage to start speaking up. That's how things work in this region, and it's always been like this, by the way. So I think what Prime Minister Mikati said is extremely important. He's demanding some kind of Lebanese sovereignty and independence in how to apply 1701. He's telling Iran to butt out. I don't think he's ever made a public statement like this before. And look, before this stage of the war occurred, the Lebanese government was really, just completely powerless. They couldn't do anything about Hezbollah's control of the entire country and Iran. Now things could be changing, and they could be changing faster than we realize. So again, I think that it all boils down to regional cooperation, and rearranging the region has to be built on top of a change of the military situation. That's the only order I can see things happening, and we should pay close attention to statements like this because I think they're a herald of change.
And what else are we hearing coming from Hezbollah at this point? Because this is what we're hearing from Lebanon, but what about the messaging coming from Hezbollah? They're going to continue to fight, it seems, until they say the last minute. But we've also heard statements just last week stating that they are open to a ceasefire.
Right. So we have heard Hezbollah deputy named Qasem last week, as you mentioned, openly called for a ceasefire multiple times. But he also said that what we're witnessing over the past few days is the newest phase, the latest phase in the war against Israel, describing, for instance, the drone attack on what Prime Minister Netanyahu's office says was the target that was his home. There are no military sources that are saying that the target was indeed Prime Minister Netanyahu's home. This was attributed to the Prime Minister's office. But regardless, Hezbollah is trying to show that they're not only still on the field, still in the game, but that they're escalating, they're taking it a few steps forward. They have vowed to gradually escalate on a daily basis their strikes. We have not seen that. We have seen them actually over the past few days reduce their amounts of strikes, but today they are moving back. It is fluctuating, and that kind of shows the gaps in what they're saying, between what they say and what is the reality on the ground. But they also are saying that they don't have the capability right now, where the topography of southern Lebanon is such that doesn't enable them to send in the tens of thousands of reinforcements that they have in Syria, in the likes of pro-Iranian militias, in the likes of Houthi fighters. And what they have right now are a few hundred fighters who are keeping 70,000 Israeli soldiers busy. That's how they're describing it. In my opinion, this sounds like a cop-out, because not only is there minimal opposition in many of these border villages that have been turned to Hezbollah military compounds, but the Israeli forces are continuing to mark achievements on the ground on a daily basis. We talked about this earlier. We were expecting a more significant front from Hezbollah, and this is attributed, in my opinion, also to the degrading of their military capabilities, but simply taking out their entire strategic top leadership. Now, we could have had a similar discussion regarding the day after Hamas's leaders were eliminated, Hania and Sinwar, in Gaza, but there is no alternative. That is not the case here in Lebanon. The alternative is the legitimate, democratically elected government that simply has lost its sovereignty, given that Lebanon has become an outpost of Iran. And I completely agree with Yaakov's assessment and analysis as to what we heard caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati say. If Hezbollah without Nasrallah is not the same Hezbollah, Lebanon also appears to be not the same Lebanon, and that this is the diplomatic effort that needs to go alongside the military effort, very important, that needs to continue along Israel's border to remove that immediate ground threat. Hezbollah trying to flex its muscles, saying that they're not going anywhere, but the fact that we hear Prime Minister Mikati talk like this shows that the cloud that Nasrallah had over the entire state of Lebanon in terms of its sovereignty and political independence, that has been removed. The skies are clearing up over Lebanon in that respect, and this is a critical opportunity right now, and I think it would be helpful if the international community, rather than just chastising Israel and continuously criticizing it, would work to prop up this legitimate Lebanese government and to help it usher in a new day in Lebanon, one that is not under the boot of Iran and is not a forward outpost of the Islamic revolution.
We see how the whole region can truly change by the death of these prominent terror leaders. Now, I want to go back to the death of Sinwar for a moment, because one of the first directives that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave following the news of Sinwar's death was to let the family members of hostages know that no one was injured during Sinwar's killing, as many people believe Sinwar would constantly be surrounded by Israeli hostages as human shields. But the terror leader was on his own above ground. And now, following his death, 101 hostages are still captive in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu had a message to the remaining Hamas terrorists holding Israeli hostages. Release them now, and you'll be safe. But Hamas doesn't seem to be listening, saying they won't release hostages until Israel ends the war and completely withdraws from Gaza.
Those prisoners will not return to you until the aggression on our people in Gaza is stopped, and full withdrawal from it, and release our heroes, the prisoners, from the occupation jails. And we continue with Hamas path. We mourn the leader, our fighter and brother, the martyr Yahya Sinwar, Hamas political chief and the leader of the Al-Aqsa flood battle, who was killed a hero, a martyr, fighting and not stepping back.
Well, tonight is Saturday night, and that means another weekly demonstration in Tel Aviv demanding a hostage release deal. Many calling right now on the Israeli government to leverage Sinwar's death to secure a deal. Emily Francis is at the main demonstration in Tel Aviv and joins us live now. Emily, what are you hearing on the streets tonight? I'm curious if there's possibly more hope in weeks past that a deal could be coming soon.
You know, I think, hope is a good word, a good question. I think it's really a mix of both. Obviously, the killing of Sinwar automatically is going to bring some hope that, the main impediment to a hostage deal has been eliminated. But of course, we also have to look at the reality that is facing the situation. You know, tonight, families are coming. They're expecting to start a press conference here in the Kiryat in a short time. Again, there will be a weekly demonstration a little bit later in Hostage Square, continuing to push the momentum and the pressure to partake in a hostage deal. But again, it's hard to get too hopeful, given that there are fears and are threats that as to avenge the killing of Sinwar, that potentially the Hamas terrorists that are guarding some of these hostages, there's of course that fear and risk that they could be killed as an act of revenge. Obviously, we hope that won't happen. As far as hostage negotiations, nothing on the table now as far as continuing those negotiations. So still, a lot more question marks than answers. But still, in spite of it all, people are going to be showing up here as they do every Saturday, continuing to rally and give a rallying call to do whatever is necessary to bring the hostages home.
And we'll be coming to you for another update as more of those family members do start to gather there in Tel Aviv. Emily Francis, thanks so much. Now, back here in studio, Yaakov, I'm curious because Israel time and time again has said it was Sinwar who was holding up any chances of a deal. And not only Israel, but the United States and some of these other mediators as well. So now these family members are saying there's no more excuses. But is that true? If Sinwar's gone, how do you even start to have some of these negotiations to release about the hostages?
I think there are new opportunities here to make new offers to the Hamas terrorists and to the clan members in Gaza who are holding on to the hostages. And Israel can show new levels of flexibility because Sinwar is out of the picture. These terrorists can be offered immunity. Some of them can be offered safe passage out if they want. There's a whole suite of deals that can be offered to these terrorists, and I think should be offered in order to facilitate a release where possible. I think Sinwar was the main stumbling block to a deal. His demands were maximalist. He was unwilling to compromise at all. As you said, the White House itself, which has been very critical of Netanyahu, has said time and again that Sinwar recently has been the main obstacle. Now he's out of the picture. I think this creates new opportunities, new flexibility, new offers, new out-of-the-box potential, and I'm sure that those who are responsible for negotiations in Israel are going to be initiating new ideas and reach out directly to these terrorists with offers saying you should rethink your situation. If you don't want to end up like Sinwar, then there are a bunch of things that can be done if you let go of our people.
And I just want to add here that even the EU, which has not been very positive towards Israel, recently has been saying, the EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell came out and said, this is an opportunity for change. This is an opportunity for the release of the hostages, for them to be brought back home, for a deal to be reached. So there does seem to be a moment right now of a hope that Netanyahu will be able and willing, because the willing part is very important as well, to take this opportunity and turn it into something positive for the Middle East, for Israel, for Gaza, for the future of the region. I think we're looking at a point where we've got the weakening of Hezbollah, we've got the weakening of Hamas, but we've got an Iran that is still standing strong, and its rhetoric has not wavered. I mean, just I believe it was yesterday, President Biden came out and said that he has an idea of where and how Israel's response to Iran is going to take place. And today, Iran's foreign minister came out and said that if anyone knows and holds back that information, they will be punished. And they've also, the Iranians have also said that Nasrallah's death changes nothing. Sinwar's death changes nothing, that they will continue to push on. So, of course, I mean, it is expected to continue to hear these strong words and the strong rhetoric out of Iran, but we have to keep in mind that it is still a very dangerous player and a very powerful player, and this tit for tat that's going on between Israel and Iran is something to keep an eye on as well.
And we're going to unpack this even more later in the broadcast as well when it does come to the impending Israeli retaliation against Iran. But right now I want to take us back more than a year ago, as it has been more than a year since the October 7th massacre. And the sharing of testimonies of survivors from that dark Saturday, it's still as crucial as ever. One Israeli NGO created a virtual reality program to recreate and tell the stories of 5 survivors. The program is called Survive to Tell, Be the Witness, and it was developed by Israel Is. To talk more about this latest technology, I'm joined by the CEO of Israel Is, Nimrod Palmach. Nimrod, thanks for being with us this evening. First, if you could just walk us through how this technology works. It's an immersive experience of survival.
Thank you. So many museums around the world understand the power of storytelling and technology. And basically, after my own experience in Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7, while I'm taking part in the liberation of the kibbutz, I'm standing in front of these atrocities and this enormous day that I've been through. And I just ask myself, what can I do? How can I share this story better? And that's how we connected this idea of gathering testimonies and allowing students in America or basically everywhere in the world to be present with us on October 7 at the site. Now, this is a very game-changer tool in the war of advocacy or getting hearts closest to us.
This is, I have to believe, an incredibly powerful and emotional program as well, as it transports people to the horrors of that day. So what has been some of the response that you've heard from people that go through this emotional experience?
We all understand that there is a huge combat now in campuses about the hearts of students. Now, unfortunately, pro-Palestinian sides are doing really good work in getting people closer and closer to false narratives. And what happens here is you can actually, again, you can be an eyewitness. That's why we call it be the witness, be active. And when you hear testimonials, not only you get attached to them, but you are in the site with them. It really gets your heart close and it draws empathy. So most of the reaction we hear are people being in shock, have no idea that this would happen to this kind of magnitude. And they just want to ask more questions. They want to dialogue more and they want to engage more. And that's exactly what we want them to do.
And Nimrod, right now there's 5 stories that people have the possibility to really experience. So how did you as a team decide on these 5 stories to tell, these 5 individuals?
We just looked for a variety of stories, and unfortunately we had many to take and to choose on. We chose 2 girls from the Nova Festival. One, her name is Milet. The second one, she's Ethiopian Jew. Her name is Mazal. Both different stories, but really, really intense and awful. And some of them has sort of happy ending. We chose Ophir Engel, a young kid that was kidnapped to Gaza while he was 17 and released while he was 18 from Gaza. And we chose Remo Salman El-Ozel, a Muslim police officer. We wanted to show the diversity in Israel. We wanted to show how we really coexist in Israel. And the 5th one is my own story. As an activist story, I don't see myself as a victim. I had a weapon. I took a weapon from a wounded soldier and I engaged to battle. And that's what we want to bring. We wanted to bring a whole story, like an ecosystem of what's happening in Israel.
That's really so powerful and impactful, especially on these college campuses right now with, as you mentioned, the rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and anti-Jewish sentiments, truly. And so with this now, exactly, if people are curious, how can they find it themselves and possibly see some of this and engage in this virtual reality experience?
We are in a lot of places, but basically go on Instagram, look for Survive to Tell. You can go online to the Israel Is website or Survive to Tell website, and it's easy to connect us, to find us. People can connect me via LinkedIn. And listen, again, we have really high ambitions. We want to reach 10,000 students next year. We want to get to 500 campuses. We want to create a change in the younger generation. We all believe that they are the next leaders of America. By the way, not just America, other countries as well, the UK, Australia, Canada, and others. And we want to invest in these next leaders.
Nimrod Palmach, thank you for sharing this incredible program that you and your team has been able to develop and really shape those young minds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shabbat shalom.
Now, as we're talking about these stories, these testimonies from more than a year ago, it's all a full circle moment for some Israelis as the horrors of October 7th happened at the end of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. And now Israeli brought to justice Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind of that, at the beginning of this Jewish holiday, Sukkot. It feels like a full circle moment for many, but it also shows that this was a long war and it's an ongoing war, and these victories, let's say, did not come easy.
Yeah, 100%. That's part of the era of war that we're in here in the Middle East. Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the worst massacre that the Jewish people have sustained since the Holocaust, his goal was very simple. It was to destroy the state of Israel. And he had hoped to harness the entire Iranian axis to join him. He wasn't able to do that to the extent that he wanted. And so that enabled Israel to prioritize, in the first part of this war, its military resources in the Gaza Strip. And we saw how Israel got into the mode of a long war. Even though the military was not originally built to do this, it adapted and learned how to do this on the go. And I think this is a very important warning about what happens when you, in this day and age, when you create a vacuum in a territory like we unfortunately did in the Gaza Strip. The jihadists who will fill that vacuum will create capabilities that cannot be eliminated in a day, not in 6 days. The era of the 6-day war is over as well. If these kinds of asymmetric terrorist armies are allowed to entrench themselves, it takes years to uproot them, and that will be true pretty much everywhere. So I think that this is definitely going to be a strategic lesson going forward. Yahya Sinwar's attempt to destroy the state of Israel in the name of his jihad and to set up this Islamic state in its place not only failed, but actually ended up creating, in a long-term manner, the basis for a new region, which I think we will start seeing happening step by step. So it is coming full circle. It's a terrible year, but hopefully the next year will be
to something new,
much better for the Jewish people and the Middle East as a whole.
Let's certainly hope for that. Yaakov Lapin, thank you for joining us on this first hour of I-24 News. Bianca Zanini and Ariel Osran, you'll be staying with me here in studio. Unfortunately, we have to go out for a quick break, but we will be back with more updates onto all of the developing situations that's happening right here in the Middle East. Stay with us.
Shalom, ¿qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Welcome back to this special edition of I-24 News. I'm Nicole Zedek. For those just joining us, our top story throughout the region is the killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. After a year-long manhunt, he was killed Wednesday during a routine IDF operation in southern Gaza's Rafah. Now, this drone footage captured his last moments, wrapped from head to toe, concealing his face, injured in the hand, and throwing a stick as a final act of defiance. And it's this act of, quote, resistance that's inspiring pride among Palestinians. They say Sinwar fought Israel until his very last moments. And following his death, the resistance will still live on.
This is a resistance that does not disappear when men disappear. The assassination of Sinwar will not lead to the end of the resistance or to a compromise or surrender and raising the white flag. It is true that this might raise Netanyahu's political clout, but it won't stop the resistance and won't stop Palestinians from continuing their resistance until their right of self-determination.
But I do not think this will impact a ceasefire, and it is evident as Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated during the beginning of the war in Lebanon, and the war on Lebanon is ongoing. So I see that this will not stop the war on Gaza unless the Israeli hostages are returned to their families. That will be a sufficient reason to stop the war, but Sinwar's assassination will not impact stopping the war on Gaza.
Well, for more, I'm joined in studio now by Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Doron Avital, former commander with the IDF Special Forces, as well as still with us our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran. Now, Ariel, I watched this video, and personally, I see a coward. I see a man who is still been beaten down by Israel over the course of the year. But what we're hearing coming from many of the Palestinians inside Gaza and really the resistance, quote, around the world, they're stating that this is a man who fought until the very last moments. And so how is this video now inspiring possibly some more of this followed up resistance following the aftermath of Sinwar's death?
Yeah, I think everyone kind of wants to take from this video whatever supports their own personal worldview. In the West, it is seen as a coward coming out of his tunnel, hiding, and then till the last moment until he was caught. But for the Palestinians and supporters of the so-called axis of resistance, this is seen as a heroic documentation of a terrorist in his final moments. But they're in all the messages by Hamas calling him the people's leader, the leader of the people. And this is something, while it is understandable how he could be presented that way when you're trying to incite more and more people to take up arms against Israeli civilians and soldiers, it puts the future Hamas leadership in a bind, because you don't have another individual like this who can lead the masses. I think that is why he was picked in the first place to succeed Ismail Haniyeh, despite the known challenges that would be in his, it wasn't known at the time that it would be a short tenure as leader of Hamas, being in the tunnels of Gaza amid a war with Israel. But these are images that Hamas are trying to personify him as a hero moving forward, because they don't have those heroes right now. Again, hero in quotation marks, as they try to sell this to the Palestinian people, why this war needs to go on, why they need to continue fighting Israel. It does raise significant questions that I believe we'll discuss further on as to the current status of the succession process in Hamas. It's going to be fascinating, but trying to project Sinwar as this leader with the kafia fighting until his last moment, it is understandable why they're doing it right now, to show that as tens of thousands of Gazans are dying according to Hamas figures. Again, there's no way to discern how many of those are combatants and how many are not. So whenever a Hamas leader or families, relatives of Hamas leadership, does end up dying at the hands of Israeli forces, they try to use that to show that they're part of this campaign, that they're fighters alongside the Palestinian people that are taking the brunt of this of the suffering. But again, while Hamas is engaged in this attempt to try and personify him as a hero in the past, moving forward, this does make it more challenging because Hamas simply does not have these this kind of leader, these kinds of individuals. All they have are the political leadership, men in suits, not men in fighting gear. And so moving forward, this will be harder to garner the Palestinian people into this continuous fighting, something that it was easier to do under Sinwar.
No, I want to add, you're mentioning, Ariel, how Hamas is trying to portray this in one way, and perhaps they are doing that successfully when it comes to some Palestinians, picturing their leader, fighting, defiant until the very end, throwing a stick at a drone. At the same time, the reality is also that it could be very demoralizing for the fighters that were looking to him and that we're seeing him being in tunnels, being underground, being in Gaza, fighting, sending out messages, standing strong, and there's also an element of weakness in that video. So I completely agree that whatever your worldview is, that's what you'll take from that video. But at the same time, the result is that he's dead and he's no longer here, and these were his last minutes, and it's humiliating in many ways. He looks into the, in quotations, eyes of the drone. He looks into the camera, and his life is taken. And of course, this leaves the opportunity for Israel, for Benjamin Netanyahu in particular, to take a chance on this power vacuum. And right now there are reports that the IDF is dropping leaflets in Khan Yunis in Gaza, saying that Sinwar ruined their lives and that Palestinians should lay down weapons, return hostages, and live in peace. The question is, of course, how much these IDF leaflets will have an effect on Palestinians that right now, in many cases, are in mourning, and there's no love lost for Israel here. I mean, in most cases, there's a war.
Shows a bigger sign of also just the education and the ideology inside the Gaza Strip right now. Because Doron, even though Sinwar is dead, the ideology does not die with him, perhaps. And so what's the next phase that Israel has to battle if you do want to have a different day after without Hamas and without Sinwar's ideology? How do you start to tackle that inside the Gaza Strip now that he's gone?
No, for sure, you should think about the day after in Gaza. And I think the death of Sinwar is a turning point, and we should take it as a turning point. We shouldn't underestimate what was achieved, what is done here. I'm saying this Sinwar is Hamas in the context of the last few years, in the context of the massacre of the 7th of October. There's no other leader that could have pulled it off, and we have to acknowledge it. This is the first enemy, and the enemy is dead. They lost their leader, and now we have to try to utilize this moment and to try to create a new landscape. First of all, in terms of the hostages, so I think we have two objectives in this turning point. One, of course, the hostages, and the guy from Gaza was a very good analyst when he said it won't end before the hostage would not be freed. So the next objective is the hostages, and the objective afterwards, and they might be interconnected, is the day after in Gaza. And we should move forcefully forward. And not, because sometimes I hear now this sentiment that people try to underestimate this moment. This is a turning point in the war. Sinwar is gone. Okay, let's move forward. Let's bring the hostages in whatever means possible. Let's sit, let's plan, let's try to do a deal, whatever is possible. And then the day after, and work forcefully to this direction.
I think it's important, I think it's important, you're absolutely right, it is a turning point, but it is a turning point if Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is able to
pull it off.
Yes, to make this into a turning point. I mean, at the end of the day, the ball is now in his court. Is he going to want to push forward for a deal right now? What about his political, the political landscape in the coalition? I mean, we've got coalition members talking about pushing pushing even more against Hamas, staying in Gaza, taking over. I mean, it is a completely splintered backland that he has and that and he's going to have to make some tough decisions. It's true that there are now more options for negotiations and more options to talk, but at the end of the day, if Hamas stands strong on not allowing the IDF, any IDF presence, at least for a while, then we will not see a major turning point right now. Perhaps in a while, but the fighting is going to continue.
Well, I want to talk more about that because we are seeing, as you mentioned, following Sinwar's death, the fighting continuing inside Gaza. Ariel, some of the updates that we have as far as the IDF's operations inside the Gaza Strip, we are hearing reports of pretty still intense clashes happening in operations more in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. So what's really the latest as far as the fighting and the landscape inside Gaza right now?
Right. So the IDF's operation in Jabalia is ongoing. Hamas is saying that for the past 15 days, Israel has been pummeling the civilian population hard. We see continuous strikes of schools and other institutes that are supposed to be protected by international law, but the moment Hamas enters them, takes over and uses them as command centers, as launch pads for their attacks, unfortunately for the existence of international law, but this is the reality that the forces are operating in, and they lose their protection, and Israeli forces continue to operate there, also targeting sites like this, explaining that they have issued numerous warnings for the population to leave there. And this also the ongoing operation in Rafah, the same operation that led to the elimination of Yahya Sinwar, as he was identified as a regular Hamas terrorist, and only after he was eliminated was he identified as the leader of Hamas, walking or hiding, I should say, amidst the rubble in southern Gaza. But I do want to note that if we're looking at the current status in Gaza and perhaps even setting our sights moving forward the day after, Hamas paid its salaries to its fighters and civil workers yesterday. And so this shows that in the absence of an alternative, we said this time and time again, and it needs to be reiterated, in the absence of an alternative for Hamas, Hamas will be able to recover. It is doing it in terms of its civil rule, civil administration. It does it the moment Israeli forces leave any area that it's been operating. The next day, you see Hamas bulldozers clearing the area, Hamas government officials reestablishing their rule in the area. And so on a tactical level, Hamas is still there in terms of its military capabilities, albeit reduced to guerrilla warfare, but still those capabilities are there. And its civil administration, that's still there too. And so any talk about this being the end of Hamas as the leader of Gaza, that is not the case until an alternative is propped up. What are the options? The options are reformed PA, that is what Western governments are supporting, and the other alternative is trying to prop up local leadership, but Hamas continues to cast its shadow over any internal attempt to show even a whiff of an alternative for Hamas. So that internal reality in Gaza maintains amidst the continuation of Israel's ground operation there, albeit in a reduced capacity. So the situation in Gaza is pretty stagnant even after this strategic achievement of the elimination of Hamas. Without an alternative for this terror organization, they will continue to raise their head and reestablish their control over different places of Gaza, as we see happening as latest as yesterday with the distribution of its salaries to its civil and military operatives.
No, but I want to insist that this is a major turning point. I mean, we really start, in the last few days, we are starting really to undermine what is achieved. Hamas without Sinwar, it's not the same Hamas, it has to be clear. A guerrilla warfare, civil infrastructure for sure. And of course, Israel has only two choices ahead of it. Either occupation of Gaza, which is the option, of course, that the right-wing coalition is pushing for, really to command Gaza for the next 4 or 5 years and see what's up, who knows. Or, on the other hand, to think of the day after and stand of the Palestinian Authority. The idea that local leaders would emerge which are not Hamas, I think it's an option it's a sort of fantasy that never existed, not in the West Bank and not in Gaza. So those are the two options, and Israel has to make a decision and to make it very quickly. But I say, the first objective, hostage deal, then the day after, and to think about, in this junction, I would say not to take the junction of reoccupying Gaza. We've been there. Let's not repeat history. The same goes for Lebanon, by the way.
Well, and right now, as we talk about reestablishing, the big question that we hinted at is exactly who is going to replace Sinwar as head of the leader in Hamas's terror group. There's about 3 top contenders right now, a few more that we'll dig into, but one of those being Sinwar's younger brother, Mohammed, who's a senior commander in Hamas's military wing. Just like his brother, Mohammed has been active in the terror group for decades and was also jailed by Israel, where he spent 9 months in prison in the 90s, as well as 3 years in a Palestinian Authority prison in Ramallah before escaping in 2000. Another possible replacement is Khaled Mashal, the former Hamas political bureau leader who's currently living in Qatar. He's been a prominent leader for decades and actively involved in the ongoing mediation talks between Israel and Hamas since the start of this war. And one more name being thrown in the ring is senior Hamas political bureau official Khalil al-Hayya, who's also in Qatar. He's reportedly one of the few people Sinwar felt he could rely on. Now, in addition to these 3 names, there are some other names being thrown in the ring as well. Ariel, I'm curious what you're hearing as the different Arab media reports as well as to who could be a possible replacement right now.
Right. So I want to take you to a meeting that Hamas officials, leading officials, political officials, held in Turkey yesterday with the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. In that meeting, the Turkish Foreign Minister pressed the Hamas representatives, saying that you need to pick a new leader and fast, because there's a lot of issues that need to be discussed. Also the future of Hamas, as we've been discussing here, and also the future of the negotiations. But who was leading that meeting, as the picture that we're seeing right now, that person sitting across next to Hakan Fidan, is not any of the 3 names that we mentioned, but rather the head of Hamas's Shura Council, Mohammed Ismail Darwish, seen as perhaps the closest thing to a spiritual leader that the organization can have. A lot of history in Hamas, and the reason why I'm sticking to this name is because he was the one who also helmed the meeting, another meeting in Istanbul with Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi. It wasn't Khalil al-Hayya who's sitting in the first seat to his right, but it was Darwish. And I think this raises interesting question marks as to who will end up succeeding Sinwar. On that note, interesting reports coming out of Sharq al-Awsat, Arabic media, saying that whoever this new leader is, it will be kept under wraps by Hamas, because they do not want to disclose, or the disclosure of the identity of the new Hamas leader, putting an Israeli target on his back. An Israeli target will be placed on his back regardless, unfortunately to say for the Hamas leadership. But at the end of the day, this shows 2 things. One, that Hamas is very concerned that after 2 of its leaders eliminated in just a few months, that it does not want to turn its future leader into another target, even though he will be. But I think this also, we talked about Hamas's posture in the eyes of its constituents, so to speak, of its the people that it rules. This is not going to help in terms of the internal legitimacy for Hamas, but they're not looking for legitimacy. They get their legitimacy in Gaza through force, and they are the only force active in Gaza right now. And so we have these kind of 2 tiers going on. We have, I think, a disconnection of Hamas in Gaza once more, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mohammed Sinwar, who is the de facto leader of the military wing, assume that role. As for the political leader of Hamas, I think that's going to go back to the suits of Hamas. I think they learned from their mistake of putting it on the shoulders of Yahya Sinwar. That's why I don't think Mohammed Sinwar will take this position. But alongside Khalil al-Haya and Khaled Mashal, two prominent names, I think we also need to throw into the mix Muhammad Ismail Darwish, the head of the Shura Council, who, as of now, he's acting as a de facto political leader of Hamas.
And we see these leaders outside of Gaza as well. And so should Israel have a stronger stance on also cracking down on Hamas that's not in Gaza, but that's still funding Hamas from outside?
Yeah, but it's an interesting dilemma when you feel like in The Godfather, killing all your enemies. In the end, you have to negotiate with someone. And we've been trying to kill Khaled Mashal, the failed attempt of Bibi Netanyahu.
In 97, yeah.
Really a miserable failure of the Mossad. We also fail from time to time. So Khaled Mashal is really not oriented with Iran, which is an important thing in the context of how this organization would evolve forward. So I think we have to also be clever right now and work out cleverly. We want our hostages. I said this is the first mission. We have to think when Sinwar is being killed, he's killed with 2 or 3 bodyguards. I mean, this is not somebody who runs an organization with a bigger infrastructure. He runs for his life. So Hamas is depleted in Gaza, and let's try to make the most out of it in any way possible. And I'm saying the first is the hostage deal, and the second is the day after. And then the day after, we shouldn't forget people like Khaled Mashal, who was an enemy in the... Who knows, in some context, when we bring the Palestinian Authority, when we bring back Dakhlan from Qatar, whoever would be the leader, we can think something that would be a new structure that can be worked out in Gaza, and some of them can be our ex-enemies, as was also with the PLO. We should remember, in '82, when I was fighting in Beirut against the PLO was a fierce enemy, cruel enemy. We treated them not differently than Hamas Gaza. Okay, and we've killed their leaders, and in the end, it ended with the Oslo Accord. So I'm saying we should be very open about the future right now, because this is the real turning point, and I wouldn't want to see us, the Israeli government, the Israeli society, miss on this turning point. We succeeded to eliminate the enemy,
the main target on
the main target that really initiated this massacre that was we could not have imagined before, and he is the guy before any other leader of whoever is among our enemies.
And I want to talk more about exactly who Sinwar was, because he had spent more than 20 years in Israeli prisons until he was released during the 2011 prisoner exchange deal for Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. And during that time in prison, a former Shin Bet official interrogated Sinwar for some 180 hours and described Sinwar as the cruelest man he's ever met, a ruthless and irrational man with murderous eyes. Take a listen to this interview from December 2023.
I can say about Yahya Sinwar that he was the cruel man that I ever met, in my life. He was really cruel. He killed at least 12 people, at the Gaza Strip, all of them. He suspected that they cooperated with the Israeli intelligence, so he killed them with machete of butcher. That's the reason that the Palestinian in Gaza Strip called him the butcher from Khan Yunis. That was his name. Yahya Sinwar was a murder man. He has a murder eyes. He is dreaming all the time how to kill Jews. That was Yahya Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar, for him, it doesn't matter if it is a boy, a child, a woman. He wants to kill Jews, by machete. That was his dream. He told me that the best is to kill them by machete. That was during the interrogation. What was at the 7th October, they used machete and they used also gun and rifles. He wanted Hamas to succeed and to occupy territories in Israel. That was Yahya Sinwar. When I was interrogated with Yahya Sinwar, I asked him, you are now 28, 29, and how come he's not married? How come he doesn't want a family? So he told me, the Hamas is my wife, the Hamas is my child, the Hamas for me is everything. I'll make everything to succeed as a Hamas officer and be sure that I'm going to kill a lot of Israelis in Gaza or outside Gaza. I think I knew him better than his mother. After 180 hours that I interrogated with Yahya Sinwar, believe me, I know him, I smell him, I eat him, everything. You know, he is the man that I will never forget. Yahya Sinwar was at the prison. He was the chief of the whole Hamas prisoners. They were sitting together. They make discussion inside the prison, of course, and they taught how to fight the Israelis, you know, after they will be released. That was his plan. He killed 3 people of the Hamas that he suspects they are cooperating with the Israelis. So all the people that was inside the prison saw how he killed by himself, by his hands, you know, with razors. It was awful to hear, you know, he wrote papers and gave them to the Red Cross, and then the Red Cross transferred those papers to the members of the Hamas outside. He gave an order how to kill Israelis outside, even in Judah and Samaria. He made the connection between the Hamas and the Iranian when he was in the prison. He got from the Iranian a lot of missiles and other guns, of course, grenades and etc., and then brought it through the canals to Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, after Gilad Shalit deal, he was released. I myself was against, you know, the release of Yahya Sinwar, because I knew if he will be outside, he will make a lot of trouble for the Israelis.
This will be the only story.
Now, on that note, we are going out for a quick break here on I-24 News, but stay with us as we continue to unpack the latest developments happening right here in Israel. Stay tuned.
Introducing the brand new I-24 News Video On Demand app.
You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary.
Whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News Video On Demand app today.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to this special edition of I-24 News. As we come on the air right now, there are sirens once again sounding in northern Israel, in both Shmera and Shtula. This has been throughout the day. Hezbollah has launched more than 200 rockets at northern Israel, one of them killing a 50-year-old man in Acre. Meanwhile, the IDF continues with operations in southern Lebanon, demolishing the deepest underground command center found to date. I'm going to want to come back here in studio now once more. With these operations continuing inside southern Lebanon, they're going deeper and deeper, and we're having significant gains. So, Doron, the intelligence right now that Israel is gaining with these operations, what does this mean for the future of the operations, specifically against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon?
I think it serves the operation right. I think we shouldn't forget that before the incursion, we had this undercover operation, like they say 70 of them, that was intelligence gathering and preparing this invasion. I think that the way it's prepared and the way it's conducted right now by the IDF, it's very well done. I mean, carefully taking the ridge, those ridge of mountains and villages that commands our territories. And we do it carefully. We don't, I mean, the aim is very clear. The objective is very clear. We want this 1701, whatever you call it. We want the Litani River to the south clear from Hezbollah. Now, it's not an easy task because, as we know, many of those villages are Shiite villages in which the residents themselves many of them were members of the Hezbollah forces. So it's not like it's different, by the way, in the 80s when the PLOs were taking these territories, they were not the inhabitants of the villages. Okay, so the story was different. So this is more complicated in this fashion. And of course, what you said about those infrastructure that were built underneath, the whole tunnel system,
the massive
command
underground
system,
tunnels.
yeah. So this is a task to tackle, and I said in this war there's one units of the IDF that gets a lot of fame is the engineering units, or Yahalom, those very fine commander unit of the engineering divisions, and they do a lot of job there. They have to work there. It's not only like booby traps and so on, but also to undercover this infrastructure, to dismantle it, to explode it. This is a real work that is done carefully and methodically, and stepping it forward deeper and deeper, but the decision would be made as we go along.
Well, and earlier in the day today as well, we were talking about how a drone launched from Hezbollah actually made impact at least near Prime Minister Netanyahu's residence. The significance of something like this, Ariel, the fact that they're targeting the Prime Minister of Israel using this intelligence that clearly they know where his home is in northern Israel. What does this mean, and how should Israel perhaps be responding to an attack like this?
Right, well, everyone who opens Google Maps can find out where the residence of Netanyahu is. In Caesarea, he was not there. He was in his personal residence in Jerusalem at the time. But this is a further illustration of the way, the capabilities that Hezbollah has to breach Israel's air defenses. Now, when it comes to drones, Israel has proven to be less effective in downing them. If we're talking about 90 to 95% success rate when it comes to rockets, missiles, drones, it drops to 80%, 75%. That's still very high on all accounts, but it is not hermetic. It is not perfect. And we have seen, since the start of the war, a gradual escalation in the use of these drones. Just last week, training base of Golani sustained a direct impact, killing numerous soldiers. And so now again we see that they can make it 70 kilometers into Israel without being detected.
I think they were detected. They were not. This time it was not intercepted.
So it was detected when it crossed, but
they
then
lost sight of it.
They lost sight of
the
it.
Golani, and
also in this case, but you do see that Israel is starting to learn, learning already within a week from the incident in Bach Golani. In that instance, when the drone disappeared from Israeli radars, the IDF said it probably fell somewhere and the incident is over. Now, with this latest drone strike, today. That wasn't the case when it disappeared, but rather Israel sent out two fighting combat choppers to search and potentially down this threat. So it shows that Israel is trying to learn from its mistakes, trying to bolster its air defenses, but we also see Hezbollah ramping up their effective or more effective use of their drones. And moving forward, this does pose a significant challenge for Israeli security.
Let's get an update now from northern Israel. We have our correspondent Zach Anders, who joins us live from Haifa on the ground there. Zach, moments ago we saw red alerts once again sounding in northern Israel. We have seen more than 200 rockets fired by Hezbollah towards the north. So what are you seeing? What are you hearing on the ground there in Haifa specifically?
Yeah, this is a busy day. We've got one man in his 50s who was killed by shrapnel, another 14 casualties. The National Ambulance Service says up here in the north from earlier rocket fire. The banner headline right now is that drone that once again demonstrates that this is potentially the most lethal weapon Hezbollah has, or I should say the most effective weapon that Hezbollah has at this stage of the war. And it's one of those things where all of the military understandings, the specific details are going to stay under wraps on the Israeli side, certainly. But there are some things that we ourselves can piece together. And at this point, with two examples of drones penetrating south of Haifa, getting deep inside the country, there's only a few avenues for Hezbollah to be able to see what the drone is seeing to remotely control these. It's very unlikely, especially with the GPS spoofing that is employed in these moments on the Israeli side, to confuse the GPS signal, that these drones are not being operated remotely. All evidence right now shows that they are being operated remotely, or that they have some method to be able to pre-program a very specific destination and not be affected by the GPS spoofing, which is giving different GPS results. For example, just a few moments ago, our phones, everyone's phones here, was showing them as in Amman, Jordan, or Beirut's airport, not their true location. That's employed specifically for these drones, and if these drones can still get through despite the GPS spoofing, obviously there's some sort of major breakdown. But again, what were we talking about before this all kicked off was that the number of IDF fatalities in the north before they went into Lebanon, the majority of those fatalities of soldiers were at the hands of these Hezbollah drones. They're incredibly effective weapons Hezbollah has.
It certainly seems to be the case. Zach Anders, thanks for your coverage up there in Haifa and northern Israel right now. Now, amidst all of these latest developments in both Lebanon and Gaza, Israel has yet to respond to Iran's ballistic missile attack on October 1st. The U.S. is now seemingly on board with whatever Israel has in store. As President Joe Biden told reporters on Friday, he has a good understanding of how and when Israel plans to retaliate against Iran, which is the first time the U.S. has indicated it's reached an understanding with Israel on its impending response. Biden previously said he didn't want Israel to target Iranian nuclear or oil sites. Well, Bianca, this messaging that we're hearing coming from the United States right now, and really the Western powers that support Israel, what does it say about this possible impending attack as Israel continues to vow there will be an attack, but at the same time they do want to appease and still have the support from the U.S.?
Right, and they need it also. So let's be clear on that. And there has been negotiations, conversations back and forth between Biden and Netanyahu on how to best satisfy both sides, both wishes. Let's put it that way. We have heard from the Iranian foreign minister today, sending a threat essentially to the U.S., saying that if anyone knows of where and when an attack would happen, they will be held responsible, or they must be held to account, and they will be held accountable. And that's, of course, a threat directly to President Biden. We know that Israel is expected to answer, to respond, and it is likely that it's going to be happening within the next few days. It is we don't of course have any confirmation. That's just how it is. Of course, that's how it goes. But that's the likelihood right now, and the U.S. has been able to put pressure on Israel by also sort of promising there's a carrot and a stick. We'll send you the THAAD defense system, and you will refrain from attacking nuclear and oil sites. We'll have to see if that is really what's going to happen, but it does seem like an agreement has taken place and there is a decision.
Ariel, you have a quick update?
Yeah, no, so I want to note that part of this of these agreements were also to reduce Israeli strikes in Beirut. They have been reduced, but now they have been resumed, so that's interesting to see. And also, we shouldn't read too much into Iranian threats against the United States, because they have been targeting, through their proxies, American assets in Syria, in Iraq, hundreds of times since October 7th, and they've been doing that even before. And
rhetoric is just part of it.
No.
The threats and the warnings.
The threats show how much in a bind the Iranians are and how concerned they are, because those threats are coming out on a daily basis. But I'm saying not only we shouldn't, but also the Americans are not reading too much into that. They're brushing them off, and that shows that they're set on the course of supporting Israel in its legitimate retaliation against the unprecedented ballistic missile strike from Iran, and it's supporting it with steps on the ground, not just words by, as Bianca said, this THAAD missile.
And this is an opportunity to really reshape the Middle East, perhaps. And so you still need and want that support from the United States, but by not attacking nuclear, by not attacking oil sites, is Israel giving up on really having this strong response on reshaping the Iranian regime?
I'm not sure. I mean, Israel is Israel. I mean, we don't go into a regime change in Iran. If there will be a regime change, of course, we welcome it. And I don't think the U.S. would go now militarily into a campaign to a regime change in Iran. It did it in Iraq. It unfolded as it unfolded. So we have to be careful and do the step as they come. Of course, we declared we are going to retaliate, so we have to retaliate, and it would come. It seems, all the wisdom, everybody says, well, it would be a military target. I think it makes sense. A military target would make sense in this context, because the infrastructure of the nuclear is too vast for us to undermine it in one blow, and we want one attack. It has to be a successful attack. It's very important. Sometimes we undermine the importance of successes. When we successfully attacked in Yemen, it made the sense. So there has to be a very successful, but in some sense measured and at sync with the U.S. And I think right now, my feeling from what was said here and in general, that we're in a better sync with the U.S. Remember the problem with Gallant traveling to the U.S. and so on. So in sync with the U.S., a retaliation, a successful one, measured in the sense that we don't want to open our campaign with Iran. We have to settle the other fronts. And then the Iranian think is something that the coalition should work out together.
Well, you mentioned settling the other fronts, and something that you continue to bring up is the hostages. I want us to get another update from our correspondent, Emily Francis, who joins us live once again from the main demonstration in Tel Aviv tonight. And Emily, you're with one of the family members of a hostage who's still captive in Gaza. What are you hearing tonight?
Hi, good evening, Nicole. Yeah, I'm here right now with Yehuda Cohen, the father of hostage Nimra Cohen, who, we've had the opportunity to interview for several times throughout the year. It's the year and a week now. Just tell us, obviously everybody is here still this evening. Does the assassination and the killing of Sinwar make any difference as far as the hostage families are concerned?
Well, it makes a difference in two ways. First is, in Hamas, they have no head right now, so it could be like everyone for himself. And terrorists who hold hostages can either assassinate them and run away or wait, we don't know. So it is endangering the hostages. On the other way, it could be a promotion for a deal, but Netanyahu is still not going for a deal. We heard him Thursday evening, saying the best thing he can offer for the hostages is terrorists who hold hostages and release them will get their life. That's his most generous offer. Netanyahu is still not going for a deal. He's saying we still got important missions. What missions we've got in Gaza? The Hamas is defeated. We asking Netanyahu to go for a deal. Simple as that.
So with also the United States, trying their best, officials in the U.S. saying it doesn't look like anything is going to happen anytime soon. You have the people in Qatar saying, okay, we haven't even heard from them in 2 to 3 weeks. What would it take to even present a new deal or to continue on the one from last spring?
Well, it's very simple, I think. It should be very simple. A generous offer from our government, from Netanyahu, to the Hamas, meaning a ceasefire, a full withdrawal, prisoners release, will end this situation. This is what the Hamas demanded from the first day they kidnapped the hostages, and they are demanding it now. Ceasefire, IDF withdrawal, prisoners exchange, that will end this situation. That will bring my son and all the 101 hostages back home. Only this. And this is what we are pressuring Netanyahu to do.
Has he responded? Has he been in touch with any of you since Sinwar was eliminated?
In person, I didn't have any word from him. I don't want to speak to him either. It doesn't make any difference. I would agree to speak with him after my son will be released, but no official from the government has spoken one word to us, ever and since the assassination of Sinwar.
That's got to be really, really disappointing, but I imagine it's not a surprise.
Well, I know, me personally, Netanyahu, for Netanyahu, I'm a burden. Because, I'm standing every place I can and speaking every way I can, demanding a hostage deal. He doesn't like that. Maybe other families he does like. We saw other families with him on the plane for the UN, standing behind him and his wife. But I'm not one of those. I will never support Netanyahu as long he's not going for a deal. The minute he will go for a deal, or let's say the minute my son will be released, I will talk differently. But currently, as long as Netanyahu is only looking for his personal interests and abandoning the hostages, I have nothing to say to him in person.
All right, Yehuda, thank you as always for speaking to us. I know that, obviously it's a bittersweet time, and we just have to continue to hope that there will be some kind of either deal or some kind of miracle to bring all 101 hostages home. Back to you, Nicole, in the studio.
Certainly, Emily Francis and Yehuda, thank you for bringing us those voices on the ground there. Now, as we continue to see week after week and really over the course of the year, these hostage release demonstrations have become much more anti-government demonstrations as well, as we just heard from Yehuda right there. And there's anger. And as we're talking right now, there is a golden opportunity, it seems. This is a historic moment. Yahya Sinwar is dead. Exactly. And this was the person that not only Israel, but the United States had been holding up a deal. And so, Doron, how can Israel leverage this to release the remaining 101 hostages?
First of all, I think the information that we have here is not the information that our team, the negotiation team run by Nitzan Alon and the head of the Mossad, have been in front of them. So they have some picture about location of hostages, possible who holds them, Islamic Jihad, Hamas, whatever, who can they approach. So they have to really devise a plan right now that works in all levels. In the level of Gaza, in the level of local leaders in Gaza, in the level of leaders of Hamas that are still in Gaza, and of course with the moderators, with Qatar, with Egypt, with everybody. There's really a golden opportunity, and I think if he will miss it this time, Netanyahu would pay dearly. I think even politically, if he thinks of his future, I think this is his moment. Sinwar is dead. I'm repeating this thing. It's a very important thing. Sinwar is the image, is the figure, is the leader that is behind the worst massacre we have ever witnessed in the life of this country. So this is it in many respects.
And it's the leader that time and time again Netanyahu has blamed, saying that there's a target on his back and we will get him. Well, now we got him. So how do you move forward then with this messaging?
Yeah, so I'm saying we have this saying in my unit that I commanded that only when the hand is in the glove, it knows exactly what to do. So here in the panel, I can only talk in terms of the consideration that has to direct us. But I say, if I was the Prime Minister, I'm calling Nitzan Alon, one of our aggressive general. I put the team and I say, devise a plan. This is a new landscape, a new frame of reference. It's a frame of reference without Sinwar. Now work out a plan in all level, in all possible dimension of the situation and bring the hostages back.
I think what Yehuda asked basically is what most families of hostages and many Israelis are asking. What is complete victory, total victory? That was the goal set forth by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Sinwar is gone. Nasrallah is gone. What more is left to achieve total victory? Because you won't kill every Hamas terrorist and you won't take out all of their rockets and military capabilities. So when is it the time to say we have achieved total victory with the elimination of the strategic masterminds of Israel's biggest enemies along its borders? Now, in order to complete that picture, bringing back the hostages is what is necessary to bring upon that total victory. That's what many of the hostage families are saying, and also a lot of Israelis on a day like today.
And I think that at this moment, as we discussed earlier in the program, is Netanyahu's chance to speak to the public and speak to the next steps and speak to the future and take responsibility for what comes next and present some sort of plan. And the same criticism that has been there for months is still there now, and perhaps even more loudly, because as you mentioned, the question is what else is there to do? So tell us if there is something else to do. Tell us what it is, and then tell us how you intend to act afterwards. And Netanyahu is standing at a crossroads because he has right now sort of the glow of a victorious leader. Right? He was able to do this, to pull this off. It wasn't a targeted assassination, but it wasn't pure luck either. So there's some gray area there. But at the same time, if he wants to continue in power and see this through, he has his political coalition that he needs to deal with. And we've got voices in there and the extreme right pushing for a takeover in Gaza, pushing for stronger response, and perhaps not saying it fully, but through their actions, saying that the future of the country is more important than the future of these hostages, as if those things are not cannot be aligned.
Doron, you mentioned that Sinwar is the most, if not one of the most vile men that Israel has ever had to deal with. But what many, at least international viewers, might not realize is that Israel actually saved Sinwar's life. This is one of the reasons Israel was able to so quickly provide a DNA match to Sinwar and confirm his death. It's because doctors had his DNA on file after they performed a life-saving surgery during his prison sentence right here in Israel. Here's what one of the doctors who saved Sinwar's life had to say about the terror leader.
I knew Sinwar, his status and his ability to influence. And we also saw, while Gilad Shalit was held hostage, that the one who was calling the moves in the negotiations on this issue was not Ahmad al-Jabari outside, not Haniyeh, and not Khaled Mashal. The one who was calling the moves was Sinwar from inside the prison. We evacuated him to the hospital. He was operated on there. It was a life-saving operation, because if the abscess had exploded in his brain, he would not have survived. These are actions that we, as doctors in the prison service, see all prisoners and offer them treatment regardless of what they did and what was their offense. He is much more extreme in his views and in his will to fulfill the Hamas agenda, or the Hamas treaty, or the Hamas's view, which are of the Muslim Brotherhood, that Jews have no right to exist here. The messages Sinwar delivered to the prisoners are messages saying, "We will kidnap soldiers, and we will release you." And this he did on October 7th. The main objective was to kidnap soldiers and release prisoners. I don't think he expected this much success, and in my opinion, it was an overwhelming success for him.
Recounting this and really taking a look back at Sinwar's, I hate to use the word legacy, but his lifetime, and it was a legacy for many of the Palestinians and the axis of resistance that he influenced. And the fact that Israel saved his life, for him to then go on and commit the most horrific massacre ever to happen on Israel, it really feels a full circle moment now that, as you continue to mention, Yahya Sinwar has been killed.
Exactly. I think it's an intriguing story, and it shows also something about the conduct and the values of our society, and we have to continue like this. But also we have to be very pragmatical about how to follow, after this moment, how to follow forward, and that's what we're trying to insist. I think when you think of the leaders that are gone, Nasrallah and Sinwar, so the only one standing is Netanyahu. So he has to show us what does he have in his hands. He has to show the card. He has to show, to offer some horizon to this future, the two main enemies, and the story of Sinwar being really that his life is saved by our own doctors. I mean, for me, it's a source of pride, and not a failure of our medical system.
It shows the humanity that Israel.
Exactly, and nobody knows how the future will evolve. He took this track. He took the track of this terrible massacre. He paid in his life, but now we have to work out the system and to work out the landscape of the Middle East.
It's not just humanity and values, but it shows Israel's consistent adherence to international law. Now, in one of the documentaries done on Sinwar, Shin Bet official who spoke to him after the surgery, the removal of a brain tumor, asked him, does this change your perspective on Israel? And he said, no, I was your prisoner. You had to do it. It was your responsibility. Now, all the while, 251 Israelis were kidnapped, taken hostage, 101 remain. Until this moment, they still haven't been granted access by the International Red Cross. No international health organization has seen these hostages who are over 100 days, over 1 year in captivity. Israel, all the while, removes brain tumors to its terrorists that are incarcerated in Israel. Many Israelis are angry at this reality, but at the end of the day, Israel does need to continue to adhere to international law, as it does and as it will.
And this is a clear message and a reminder that Israel will continue to adhere to that international law. Ariel Osran, Doron Avital, Bianca Zanini, there's so much that we can continue to unpack here, but I truly appreciate your insight into this historic moment that's happening really throughout the Middle East and the world right now. For all of our viewers watching us, you can always head to i24news.tv for more updates, analysis, developments on all of these breaking news stories. For now, I'm Nicole Zedek. Thanks so much for tuning into this special edition of i24 News.
Shalom and welcome to Jewish World Weekly. I'm Caleb Ben-David, and each week we're going to bring you the latest from the Jewish world, from politics to religion, entertainment to the latest trends, and everything in between. Join me each week as we explore the global Jewish diaspora. Don't miss Jewish World Weekly only on i24 News.
נבנה מתחת לאפינו במשך שנים, ואני אומרת זאת בצער רב. אנחנו אפשרנו את זה. עמיחי פישר.
כמובן צודקת. ישראל הייתה במצב של סטטוס קוו שנובע מתחושה עמוקה של חוסר אונים. המצב של המלחמה עכשיו מחזיר את ישראל לתחושה של יוזמה, לתחושה של אקטיביות שיש לצד צבאי, שאי אפשר דוגמה יותר טובה ממה שראינו פה מול העיניים, צד צבאי, וחייב לבוא עם זה גם צד מדיני, כי שני הדברים האלה בסוף באים ביחד. מה שמדינת ישראל רוצה ויכולה להשיג זה את התחושה שכל הסביבה, לא רק ארצות הברית, כל הסביבה מכירה ומקבלת את קיומה של ישראל במרחב. עכשיו זה בא עם הרבה כוח, אבל זה בא לא רק עם כוח, אלא גם עם ברית מדינית, ברית ביטחון אזורית של כל המדינות מסביב שמכירות בישראל ונותנות לה מקום מרכזי במרחב. שני הצדדים האלה, שניהם האקטיביות של ישראל, להבדיל ממה שהיה פה לפני.
כן, אני חושב שגם חשוב לשים לב, יש הבדל משמעותי בין המנהרות של חמאס בעזה לבין המנהרות של חיזבאללה בלבנון. הדרך שלהם לחפור את המנהרות האלה הייתה הרבה יותר קשה מאשר הקרקע שנמצאת בעזה. לקח להם עשרות שנים בעצם לחפור את המנהרות האלה. ביקרתי לפני מספר שנים במנהרות שצה"ל כבר הפציץ במבצע עם אלוטוי ב-2018.
מגן צפון.
נכון, מגן צפון. וכשאנחנו מבקרים בעצם באותם מנהרות, אפשר היה לראות את כלים שבהם הם השתמשו, אבל גם עם תושייה ובעצם עם איזשהו מבט קדימה, עם גרפיטי על הקירות שהם אומרים שאנחנו בדרך לירושלים. זה בסופו של דבר אחד הדברים שחשוב לנו להבין על הארגון הזה. לא מדובר כאן באיזושהי גחמה, לא מדובר כאן סתם במנהרות שמבחינתם הם מנהרות רק למען איזושהי התקפה חזיתית, אלא באמת פעילות הרבה יותר משמעותית. אנחנו גם רואים את זה היום בהתנהלות שלהם אחרי חיסול נסראללה ובכירים אחרים. הם חוזרים לעצמם באיזשהו מובן, כי הארגון שלהם לא מדובר פה בעוד ארגון טרור רגיל, מדובר פה בצבא לכל דבר ועניין, וההתנהלות שלו היא כמו כל צבא רגיל, שגם אם הראש הולך, האחרים ממשיכים לתפקד. עוד מילה אחת ברשותך, ראינו עכשיו את הסרטון הזה, ומבחינה טרמינולוגית, כמי שמגיע מהעולם הזה של דיפלומטיה ציבורית, הם השתמשו שם במילה להשפיל את חיזבאללה. לפי דעתי זאת מילה שגויה, בסופו של דבר צריך לפרק את חיזבאללה. להשפיל לא כל כך עובד במזרח התיכון, כי רק יגרום לאיזושהי תגובת נגד.
לא, זאת לא תוכנית עבודה, זה אולי פועל יוצא, זאת לא תוכנית עבודה. כן, כולנו למדנו לדבר בז'רגון צבאי.
מה שבעצם אנחנו רואים פה, ואני שירתי במל"ל בשנים האלה, התפתחה הרתעה הדדית, לא יעזור, שהיא תוצאה של המון טיעונים מאוד הגיוניים, ומסורת אחת לא הגיונית, שזה היעדר יוזמה, שהממשלה לא יעזור נתניהו בעניין הזה, לצערי הרב, העניין של היוזמה היה קשה מאוד, והיה חסר, ואנחנו מדברים על לגיטימציה בינלאומית, היה בלתי אפשרי לפעול בלבנון, לא היה שום לגיטימציה בינלאומית, ולא סתם, אנחנו ראינו 11 חודשים שראש הממשלה המתין, עד שנוכל סוף סוף לקבל את האישור הזה, ולא היינו יכולים לעשות את המבצע הזה, אם לא היה אישור מהאמריקאים. בלבנון יש לנו גורמים בינלאומיים, צרפת, בריטניה, ארצות הברית, הם כולם ממש מימנו את צבא לבנון, ונמצאים שם בשטח. היינו צריכים שאזרחים בינלאומיים יעזבו את לבנון, שכוחות בינלאומיים יעזבו את לבנון, ויחד עם זאת, עדיין בושה, פשוט בושה מה שמזכ"ל האו"ם, כל ההתייחסות שלו היא בלתי מוסרית, בלתי מתקבלת, בלתי חוקית, לא הגיונית בעליל. יוניפיל הפך לכוח, ושלא תחשבו שהצבא לא ידע את זה, ממשלת ישראל לא ידע את זה. יוניפיל הפך למגן חיזבאללה, לא פחות ולא יותר. והבושה היא, אני חושבת שמה שהפתיע את הצבא, והפתיע את ממשלת ישראל, שאפילו שתראו כמה תוקפים אותנו, סוף סוף אנחנו באים להגן על עצמנו, גם אז אתם לא קמים והולכים. זה פשוט משהו שהוא מדהים.
מעבר לזה, יש התעקשות של בכירי האו"ם, וגם של מדינות המערב, להשאיר את כוחות יוניפיל במקומם, וכשאנחנו שואלים את הדיפלומטים המערביים, מה הסיבה שהם לא מתפנים למען שלומם, התשובה שאנחנו מקבלים, והיא די מדהימה, זה המנדט שלהם להיות שם. אוקיי.
אם זה המנדט, אז למה לא אמרו קודם?
וזה בניגוד גמור לדין הבינלאומי, מפני שכשהם באו זה היה בהסכמת ישראל, מפני שהובטח שהם ידאגו שרק צבא לבנון ולא חיזבאללה, וחיזבאללה יהיה מעבר לליטני וכל הסיפורים האלה. ולא רק זה, כמו שאמרתי קודם, הם השתתפו בפועל, יש לנו ראיות בחטיפה של החיילים בהר דב. דבר נורא והיום.
כן.
והיום הם יושבים שם כמגן בעצם לחיזבאללה שממשיך לירות עלינו. אין, זה ניגוד גמור לדין הבינלאומי, אבל האו"ם, כן, זה גם מועצת זכויות האדם שלו.
קצת שמום, מה שנקרא.
אמר הרב סולובייצ'יק יפה, שלאו"ם היה רגע חסד אחד בכל ההיסטוריה שלו, והיא החלטת החלוקה. נכון שהיא לא הקימה את ישראל, אבל זה היה הרגע היחיד, והוא ממשיך הלאה והוא כותב שהוא לא זכור לו עוד נקודת אור בכל הארגון הזה.
עמנואל מקרון בוודאי, כן, נתפס על העניין הזה.
כן. טוב, חברים, אנחנו ננצל את הפסיק הזה שככה השתרבב לו לשיחתנו. נאמר שלום לדן פרי, העורך הראשי של AP לשעבר כאן במזרח התיכון. אבל אנחנו רוצים להפנות מבטנו מזרחה. שלומי הלר כתבנו, ניסיון פיגוע היום ליד עופרה, או שמה פיגוע שיצא לפועל ופשוט לא צלח כל כך. במקרים כאלו, אנחנו מצד אחד שלומי מברכים שנמנע אסון, מצד שני זה רק אומר שהניסיונות לבצע פיגועים כאלו לא רק שלא פוסקים, מתעצמים. וזהות המפגע, אני רוצה רק להוסיף לשיחתנו, בן של מרצה בפקולטה לכלכלה, מדעי החברה באוניברסיטה בשכם, כאילו כל הקונספציות כולן.
כן, ממש ככה, זה ניסיון פיגוע, רודף פיגוע. אתמול ראינו בגבול ישראל-ירדן פיגוע אחד, היום בבנימין, כאשר בשעה 11 בבוקר, מגיע מחבל, תושב השומרון, בן 27 משכם, שהוא נוסע לאורך כביש 60, מגיע לאזור עופרה בבנימין, מזהה ניידת משטרה עומדת בכביש עצמו, ומחליט לבצע את הפיגוע. הפיגוע, באמצעות הרכב שלו, שהוא נוסע בו עם לוחית זיהוי פלסטינית, הוא מאיץ לעבר אותה ניידת משטרה, אבל למרבה המזל אף אחד לא נמצא בניידת, שוטרים שעומדים בסמוך מתרחקים, ולמעשה רק מי שנהרג באותו פיגוע זה המחבל עצמו בלבד. אז מהתחקיר הראשוני עולה כי מדובר בתושב שכם כאמור, בן 27, בן של מרצה בפקולטה פלסטינית כזה או אחרת, ואותו מחבל ללא עבר ביטחוני, כך שמבחינת המסננת של מערכת הביטחון לעקוב אותו, פשוט לא הצליחו לנטר את אותו מחבל, ואנחנו מכירים את הדינמיקה שמתפתחת בשטח, כלומר, מחבלים כאלה ואחרים שעובדים בהכוונה של תאי טרור, או כאלה שקמים בבוקר ומוסתים ובעצם מבצעים את אותם פיגועים. כרגע אותה זירת פיגוע, למעשה הרכב הזה נבדק אם הוא מולכד או לא, הכוחות בשטח זיקו אותו, הציר עצמו נפתח, ואנחנו ככה מדברים רק על הנוכחות והפריסה של כוחות צה"ל ומשטרה בשטח. אלו יימשכו גם בימים הקרובים לאורך ימי החג, על מנת לאפשר למטיילים ולנוסעים בכבישים תחושת ביטחון וכמובן ביטחון.
כן, ואם דיברנו מוקדם יותר על זה ששום דבר פה הוא לא אקראי, לא ההכנות של חיזבאללה בצפון, לא של חמאס בדרום, אז גם לא התשתית טרור הזו שאנחנו רואים ממזרח, גם פה הבחישה, המעורבות האיראנית, ברורה עד מאוד.
כן, ואנחנו גם, הזיהוי של אותו מחבל ייבדק, כאשר כוחות צה"ל פשטו בשעות האחרונות על ביתו של אותו מחבל, נדע בהמשך למה הוא משוייך, אבל בסופו של דבר ההסתה מגיעה ממקום אחר, מאותו מקום, כן. הטרור הפלסטיני מנסה להכות שוב, ארגון חמאס, ג'יהאד איסלאמי, כולם מגיעים מאותה כתובת.
שלומי הלר כתבנו, תודה רבה לך על העדכון הזה. תודה, שלומי. ג'ונתן אלחורי, אנחנו מחזיקים אותך נצור כאן באולפן כבר אי אלו שעות, נודה לך מאוד על זמנך, על בינתך, ונתראה שוב.
ונקווה לימים שקטים.
כן, כן.
אני חושב שכרגע היום, במשפט אחרון, יש היום לצה"ל מרחב תמרון מאוד גדול במה שקורה בלבנון, גם מבחינת זה שהלבנונים אומרים סוף סוף, הפעם בניגוד ל-2006, יש פעולה הרבה יותר מסיבית והרבה יותר מדויקת לפגיעה ביכולת התפעול של חיזבאללה, וגם מבחינה בינלאומית אנחנו צריכים להמשיך ולעשות את זה. לצערי, אני לא רואה היום איזושהי פעילות בינלאומית שהיא מאוד חסרה, גם לי כמי שפעיל בתוך הדיפלומטיה הציבורית ויוצא לעולם ומדבר על ישראל. כן. זה דברים שמאוד חסרים של בכירים ישראלים שיוצאים ומדברים גם לתקשורת הבינלאומית, אבל גם של פעולות שמתבצעות עם אחרים. אנחנו רואים את האיראנים מפזזים ממדינה למדינה.
והנה, נתת לנו את הדוגמה הנהדרת של רק השימוש בטרמינולוגיה, לחשוב איך שומעים את זה לא רק פה אלא גם בחוץ, במקום המילה להשפיל, לחסל, לרסק, להשמיד.
גם התמונות של סינואר, התמונות של סינואר מבחינתנו מדובר פה באיזושהי השפלה של סינואר, אבל עבור העולם, גם עבור העולם הפרו-פלסטיני, מדובר בתמונת ניצחון. הוא עטוף בכפיה, יושב על הכיסא ועדיין זורק את המקל, שזה מבחינתו הדבר האחרון.
נשימתו האחרונה.
חזרנו שוב למיתוס.
כן, חלק, דיברנו פה באמת על תמונות שיוצאות לעולם, זה אחת התמונות היום, הסמליות שיוצאות מסינואר, אנשים משווים אותו למנדלה, אני לדעתי הוא היה מנגלה, זה בעצם ההבדל הגדול.
איזה משפט סיום...
מנדלה.
נתן אלחורי, תודה רבה. לא, אבל אז זה לא חרוז אני בצד של החרוזים, תמיד בצד של החרוזים.
באנגלית זה נראה אותו דבר.
תמיד בצד של החרוזים, לא טועים עם החרוזים. תודה רבה לך, ג'ונתן אלחורי. נחזור לדיווחו של שלומי אלר, גיא עזריאל, כי בעצם אנחנו מתחברים גם למה שראינו אתמול, וזה לוקח אותנו לנושא של הפעילות הירדנית נגד טרור. אנחנו ראינו את זה, אתה יודע, בגבול המצרי עם הרצועה.
הפעילות או חוסר הפעילות.
מה ידעו, מה לא ראו, מה כן ידעו, מה אפשרו, מה זה. אנחנו רואים עכשיו גם את הגבול הזה שהוא למעשה, אתה יודע, גבול שמבוסס על אמון. אין לו בריקדות, אין לו גדר, הוא גבול פתוח.
כן, אנחנו מדווחים פה כבר לא מעט חודשים על החששות בישראל מהסכנה הביטחונית בגבול ירדן. זה יכול להיות מחבלים בודדים, כפי שאולי קרה אתמול, או החות'ים שמנסים להתפרס בכל רחבי המזרח התיכון. שמענו אגב את ראש הממשלה לפני מספר חודשים כשהיה בסיור באזור, הבטיח להקים שם מכשול משמעותי. עוד לא ראינו פעולות בעניין הזה, ובסופו של דבר, כפי שאנחנו רואים, בוודאי בגבול מצרים, העניין הזה בסופו של דבר יצטרך לקרות. בוודאי זה עניין גם של משאבים, ומדובר בגבול ארוך מאוד במקרה הזה, אבל לא תהיה ברירה אחרת. כמובן שזה לא פותר את הבעיות שקורות בתוך ירדן, כיוון שאיום טרור מתוך ירדן, אני לא מדבר עדיין על שלמות הממלכה הזו, עם הרכב אוכלוסייה שנמצא בה, אבל איומי טרור, כמו שאנחנו יודעים, לא נגמרים רק במעבר הגבול.
אין להם גבולות גיאוגרפיים.
בוודאי, יכולים לעבור גם מעל וגם מתחת לכל מכשול כזה, כמו שאנחנו כבר מנוסים מאוד, ועם זאת, מה שאפשר לעשות, בוודאי שצריך לעשות.
היציבות המשטר בירדן היא אבן יסוד במדיניות הביטחון הישראלית, והיא כרגע מאוימת על שני גורמים מאוד מרכזיים. אחד, האחים המוסלמים, דאעש, כוחות אחרים, חמאס יושבים בירדן, שוב, הרוב פלסטיני, ובתי ספר של אונר"א, עם כל האידיאולוגיה שכרוכה בכך. והדבר השני, המשטר האיראני מקיף אותם בפרוקסיז, החות'ים, המיליציות העיראקיות, ממש שם. כל רשת ההברחות של חיזבאללה ואסד עוברות דרך ירדן למצרים למכור סמים, אופיאדס, לכל מדינות המפרץ, ומשם הן מקבלות את הכסף שלהם. ואנחנו מדברות כאן באולפן שוב ושוב. לא לשכוח את עניין הכסף, אין טרור בלי כסף, חייבים. ובעניין הזה, ישראל, אנחנו מדברים על בניית קואליציות. מאוד מאוד חשוב ולעשות את כל המאמץ האפשרי לבנות קואליציה יחד עם הירדנים כדי לנסות לסכל את זה, והאמריקאים שיושבים בירדן עם הבסיסים שלהם. ולכן אנחנו צריכים את ה-good faith, אנחנו צריכים את המערכת יחסים. וזו המילה שעוברת בכל מה שאני מנסה להגיד, גם עם החטופים, גם עם הירדנים, גם עם הזה. אנחנו צריכים לבנות מערכות יחסים שאנחנו צריכים אותם. האתגרים פה הם גדולים, אנחנו לא יכולים להכל לבד.
להתייחס לשותפות, כמו עם מצוות, יש כאלה ששופטים לכף חובה ולכף זכות. אז איפה ההזדמנות ולא איפה הן מכשילות את עצמן מולנו. דן פרי, אנחנו כבר יחד במשדר הזה תקופה, עוברים מהמקרו למיקרו, הלוך וחזור. אז כשאנחנו מדברים באמת על ההזדמנות בנקודה הזו בזמן, כשחיסולו של סינואר עוד טרי, רצועת עזה מנסה להבין את עצמה מחדש, שפועל יוצא המזרח התיכון כולו. מה צריך לעשות עכשיו, לא בעוד שבוע, אלא עכשיו, בטווח הזמן המיידי, כדי להביא לתוצאות הרצויות מבחינת ישראל?
אני הייתי מבין שמדובר במצב שבו יש רגע סמלי מאוד, ומהסמליות הזאת אפשר לצאת לכיוון אסטרטגי חדש, ולתקן את הטעויות שנעשו בשנה האחרונה, ואולי גם לשמוח על ההצלחות של השנה האחרונה. בסופו של דבר, במישור הצבאי היו ועוד איך הצלחות. לא עשו שום דבר למנף את זה לאסטרטגיה מדינית. אחת הבעיות, הבעיה העיקרית אולי הייתה שרצו למנוע מסינואר תמונת ניצחון כלשהי.
כן.
הוא יוכל להגיד, אני שורד כריבון בעזה ביום שאחרי, ולא אתן לאף אחד להיות ריבון פה במקומי, ולכן אי אפשר היה, בצדק אמרו, שקשה מאוד לדבר עם גורמים אחרים שיכנסו לעזה במקומו, כי הוא היה כל כך חזק כסמל, אבל גם יותר מסמל. אז הייתי מקווה שיכריזו ניצחון, והתחילו לדבר באופן יותר אקטיבי.
כלומר, ניצחון זה עניין של הכרזה, זה לא עניין של שינוי
לא, אבל זה גם עניין של מעשים. להתחיל לדבר באופן אקטיבי עם כל הגורמים האחרים שיכולים לעזור לישראל ביום שאחרי בעזה, ואני רואה את הסקפטיות של טליה, אבל צר לי, כי אנחנו חיים ביקום שחיים בו.
גם אני חיה באותו היקום.
אבל אין יצורים מן המאדים.
לא צריך יצורים מן המאדים.
ביום שאחרי החמאס בעזה, וייתכן שעם הסתלקותו של סינואר יש אפשרות ליום שכזה, בסופו של דבר יהיו אחד משניים. או שלטון ישראלי, אולי להרבה מאוד זמן, או משהו אחר. והמשהו האחר הזה כנראה, על אף הדמוניזציה של ממשלת ישראל, שעשתה לרשות הפלסטינית, כנראה שזה הסוג של רשות פלסטינית. עם עזרה של העולם החיצון, עם עזרה של העולם הערבי המתון וכולי. אז כן, הייתי מתחיל לדבר על היום שאחרי חמאס בעזה, ולהתחיל לבנות את הקואליציה המדוברת, שכולם פה מדברים עליה, והיא יושבת על השולחן, וישראל, מה שהיא עושה בשנה האחרונה, בזה שהיא בזה לדבר הזה, זה מה שנקרא במשחקי פוקר, להשאיר כסף על השולחן. הוא לא יישאר שם לעד. ואולי, בעקבות הבחירות בארצות הברית, אפשר יהיה לדבר על הרבה מאוד דברים, בשני כיוונים.
מה שהיה נראה עתיד רחוק הוא כבר מעבר לפינה.
מצד אחד, גם דבר שנשמע שמאלני, כמו מה שהרגע אמרתי, וגם דבר שנשמע ימני. אני אומר, יש אפשרות, אחרי הבחירות באמריקה, למנף את מה שנראה
אחרי, דיברנו על טווח הזמן המדי, ופתאום אנחנו כבר שוב אחרי הבחירות באמריקה.
להביס את ציר ההתנגדות האיראני.
אולי אין חייזרים, אבל יש אנשים שתמיד יודעים להפנות את מבטנו לאיפה שצריך להסתכל. יוסי יהושע, פרשננו הצבאי, הפרשן הצבאי הבכיר של ידיעות אחרונות וויינט. אנחנו מדברים על מה שמדברים. על מה אנחנו צריכים לדבר ואנחנו לא מדברים.
יש שני דברים משמעותיים לפנינו. אחד, האירוע של היום. זה אירוע דרמטי, ניסיון חיסול לא פחות של ראש ממשלה. הכטב"ם הזה היה מאוד מאוד מדויק.
זה מה שזה? ניסיון חיסול?
מה, את רואה על זה הסבר, אלא אם כן את מסתכלת במשקפיים פוליטיות של, לא יודע, ניסיון חיסול של ראש ממשלה.
זה סיפור אהבה.
לא, אולי
כטב"ם מדויק, באותה רמת דיוק, וזהה לכטב"ם שפגע בחדר האוכל של בסיס רגבים של חטיבת גולני. בדיוק אותו כטב"ם, ברמת דיוק, אנחנו לא יכולים לתאר את רמת הפגיעה, אבל זה היה ניסיון סיכול של ראש ממשלה. הוא במקרה לא היה כאן, אבל זה מלמד אותנו על התעוזה של מי שביצע את זה, חיזבאללה, ואני מתאר לעצמי שאירוע כזה לא יכול להתבצע בלי אישור גם, או הכוונה, או הסכמה של הפטרונים באיראן, כי יש לזה השלכות. וכאן זה מחבר אותי לאפשרות התקיפה באיראן. אולי עכשיו זה גם ישנה את סל המטרות שיש לישראל. אני לא יודע, אף אחד לא יודע, בסוף נתניהו יחליט. בואו, שלא זה, אבל עושה שכל שזה יכול לשנות. כשלוח הזמנים מצטמצם, לא נשארו עוד הרבה ימים, יש כאן מומחים טובים ממני למה שקורה באמריקה, אבל השעון מתקתק, וזה קרוב מאוד. ולכן, לפני שמסתכלים על חמאס, היום שאחרי, סינואר, זה...
טווח הזמן המיידי הוא שם.
מה שאנחנו צריכים להסתכל עכשיו, העיניים נשואות לטהרן. איזה מטרות ישראל תבחר, כמה היא תכאיב להם, איך הם יגיבו, איך האמריקאים ישתתפו, האם האמריקאים ישתתפו רק בהגנה או גם בהתקפה. אנחנו, עם כל החיבה לממשל ביידן ולעזרה, אנחנו צריכים אותו בהתקפה לא פחות מאשר בהגנה. עוזרים לנו בהגנה. אגב, המערכות שלנו הרבה יותר טובות, וגם הוכחו החץ ממה שיש לאמריקאים, אבל בגלל שצריך כמות גדולה, אז אנחנו כמובן נשתמש, אבל זו הייתה הזדמנות היסטורית, גם שביידן יאמר את דברו בהקשר של הגרעין. זאת אומרת, יש כאן הזדמנות לעצור את זה. אני חושב שגם, אני לא מבין פוליטיקה אמריקאית, אבל נדמה לי שזה גם היה משרת אותו פנימה.
זה מה שניסיתי לומר, אין שום סיכוי לדבר כזה עד הבחירות. מהבחירות ועד ה-21 לינואר יש סיכוי גדול.
אבל גם פה ההזדמנות למנף, רגע, פה ההזדמנות שישראל אומרת לאמריקאים, או שהאמריקאים אומרים לישראל, hold your horses, חכו רגע, עד הבחירות, תנו לנו את הזמן הזה, ורגע, ונבוא איתכם ביחד אחרי הבחירות.
תראו, אי אפשר, אנחנו חטפנו כמעט 400 פריטים באפריל, חטפנו 400 מאיראן באופן ישיר, חטפנו 200 פריטים תכף כבר לפני חודש מהאיראנים.
וניסיון חיסול של ראש הממשלה.
וניסיון חיסול, ואנחנו לא מגיבים.
אבל מה יקרה אם זה יהיה יום אחרי הבחירות?
שנייה,
לא יקרה יום אחרי הבחירות, כי זה ימשיך.
אתה אמרת בעצמך שאתה רוצה את העזרה שלהם בהתקפה. אני מעריך שהדבר הזה יתאפשר, יש הזדמנות גדולה שזה יתאפשר ב-6 לנובמבר, לא לפני.
רק נאמר שבישראל הבטיחו את התגובה לפני הבחירות בארצות הברית, ושמענו את ביידן אומר בקולו אתמול שהוא יודע כבר...
אבל זה חלק מדיני, זה עוד פעם חלק.
שנייה, אני תכף יוצא לתדרוך על כל סיפור הכטב"ם, אז יש לי רגע לגבי הצפון, תראו, חיזבאללה יש לו עדיין יכולת לשגר. אמרנו את זה מהרגע הראשון, גם אם לקחנו לו 60%, 70%, תלוי במערכים, פגענו לו, גרמנו נזק, יש לו עדיין יכולת לשגר, ויש לו גם המון כטב"מים. היום הוא שיגר כ-150 רקטות, שיגר 3 כטב"מים שפעלו בצורה מסוימת, 2 יורטו, 1 עוד פעם לקח מזרחה, וזה פוספס ולא יורט. מה כן? אנחנו רואים שאחרי 4 ימים שוב חזרנו לתקוף בדחיה. לתקוף בדחיה, ואת זה לא אני אומר, אלא בכירים מאוד בישראל, זה המנוף אולי האחרון שנשאר כדי להביא את ממשלת לבנון ולחץ על לבנון וגורמים מחוץ להסכם. זה דבר אחד. הכותרת השנייה שהם אומרים שלא ננהל משא ומתן מול שום גוף אמריקאי, צרפתי וכו', לפני שאנחנו תוך כדי אש אנחנו נהל, אנחנו לא נחכה, לא ננצור את האש ואז יהיה איזשהו הסכם, נדון עליו. עכשיו, ראיתי כותרות לגבי הרחבת התמרון. התמרון, אני חזרתי שם לפני יומיים עם גולני, התמרון לא באמת מתקדם צפונה, אוקיי? הוא מתקדם לרוחב לצורך העניין, הוא מהים ועד ארדוב, אז כל פעם אוגדה אחרת יוצאת ונכנסת לקווים האלה, ונשארו, ואנחנו סביב ה-20 כפרים פחות או יותר שצה"ל צריך לטפל בהם, ולפני כן בתוך השס"מים, אותם מתחמים מיוערים שבהם חיזבאללה ייצר את המקפצות לתוך שטח מדינת ישראל. למה זה לוקח זמן? כי זה שטחים מיוערים, ואי אפשר להצית אותם, ניסו להצית אותם, וזה לא דליק.
כדי לחשוף את הקרקע.
כדי לחשוף את זה. ואז אמרו, רגע, אי אפשר, אז הביאו D9. עכשיו, אין לנו כמות בלתי נתפסת של D9, חלק נמצא בעזה, קצת נמצא באיו"ש, וזה שטח, זה 100 ומשהו קילומטר. וצריך לשטח את כל האזור הזה. עכשיו, כשמשטחים את האזור הזה, ואני אומר, חזרתי משם, מה שנגלה לעיניי זה מטורף, והייתי ב-2006, והייתי גם עם מפקדים, כמו מרדכי כהנא, שהיה מפקד אגוז, והיה שם באותם שס"מים. זה שטח, זה בסיסי מלחמה שהם הכינו כמקפצה. ומה ההיגיון המסדר מבחינה מבצעית? יש שס"ם לצורך העניין מול שטולה, הוא גר באייטה השייב, שזה סמוך. קם בבוקר על אזרחי.
מתלבש, מוכל סנדוויץ'.
לא, על אזרחי. הוא הולך על אזרחי לשס"ם, בשס"ם הוא במרחב לחימה, יכול לעלות על מדים, להסתתר, אתה לא רואה אותו גם אם תרצה.
קם בבוקר הלך לעבודה.
בדיוק, ומשם הוא יכול לבצע את המקפצה, ולכן זה ייקח זמן. עכשיו, יש כאלה שאומרים שזה ייקח שבועיים, אולי 3, אבל אז תשאל השאלה, האם מבחינת ראש הממשלה, צה"ל אומר, אני מסיים בזה. האם הוא אומר, רגע, האם מספיק לי 20 כפרים האלה, או שאני הולך עוד טיפה קדימה? אני חושב שאנחנו בנקודה שאנחנו יכולים למקסם את ההישג מול חיזבאללה. אנחנו לא נוכל להביא עוד איזה משהו דרמטי מול חיזבאללה. אין, תגידי לי שם, תגידי לי יכולות. ביום שישי, התקיפה בערב חג, בביירות הייתה על מחסן מאוד מאוד יוקרתי של חיזבאללה, של טילים שהוא שמר אותם בעומק. לקחנו לו אותם, יש שם עוד כמה...
בנק המטרות מצטמצם.
מאוד, גם האישים. זאת אומרת, תגידי לי, בכירים איזה שם, וואלה, אני לא יודע. תשאלי את אנשי אמן, בא אליהם, היה ביקור גם של ראש הממשלה וגם של גלנט, אז אמרו לו, תשמע,
מי נשאר?
אנחנו לא מכירים אותם, זה חבר'ה שהיו מ"פים,
מה עם שאר הרקטות בבקעת הלבנון?
יש, אבל זה מאוד מאוד קשה להגיע לכל היתר, ואנחנו לא נרדוף אחרי הרקטה האחרונה. אנחנו כן מאוד נרצה שיהיה איזשהו שינוי בתוך לבנון, לחץ פנימי, לחץ עדתי. הפעלה של המון גורמים
ולחסום את המעבר של עוד אמל"ח מאיראן.
להחלפת השלטון.
אבל מה שאני מבינה זה שגם לתיאבון המוגבר יהיה איזה מעצור, ולו רק בגלל ההישגים הרבים בשטח.
זה נכון, אחד בגלל ההישגים, ואין לנו אינספור משאבים. שואלים אותי, רגע, תגיד, למה לא מפוצצים את כל הבתים במרון הרס או באייט א-שעב? אי אפשר, אין לנו TNT, TNT אין בעולם. אין בעולם, אי אפשר לפוצץ את כל הבתים, 20 בתים, יש שם אלפי בתים, אוקיי? אתה לא יכול לפרק את הכל. אז לפעמים אתה צריך להכניס כוחות לאיתורים, למקומות שבהם אתה חושב שיש מנהרה כזו או אחרת, ולטפל בה. זאת אומרת, הציפייה שחיל האוויר יטיל את כל הפצצות החשובות שלו, או אחרי זה אנחנו נפרק את זה עם חומרי נפץ, אין בנמצא גם בעולם. אז כשאני לוקח את כל האילוצים, ויש עוד אילוצים רבים, אנחנו לא צריכים לפרט אותם ולא לתת לאויב, אני חושב שאנחנו בנקודה שבה, זה לא אומר עכשיו, זה אומר אבל בשבועיים שלושה הקרובים, אחרי שנמצא את התמרון ונביא את ההישגים, להביא לסגירה, או אפילו רחבה יותר של הפסקת המלחמה באופן כולל. אגב, אבל, זה לא תלוי במשתנה הראשון שאמרתי, איראן, איך תראה התקיפה?
אז נודה לך מאוד על העדכון הזה, זה הייתה סקירת על חלל, יוסי יהושע, הבטחתי לכם, הוא יפנה את מבטנו למקום הנכון. תודה רבה, יוסי יהושע, פרשננו הצבאי. אמרת איראן, אז אמרת מאיר ג'אבד אנפאר, הדוקטור מאיר ג'אבד אנפאר, המומחה לאיראן. מיד נהיה איתך, מאיר, אבל בואו קודם לכן נשמע את דבריו של שר החוץ האיראני בבליץ מדיני. רוצים הפסקת אש, בשם לבנון הם מדברים, כן? בואו נשמע.
احتمال بروز جنگ در منطقه همچنان یک احتمال جدی است و هیچ کس در منطقه بجز رژیم صهیونیستی خواهان این وضعیت نیست. ما خواهان کاهش تنش‌ها هستیم. البته همونطور که بارها اعلام کردیم برای هر سناریویی، برای هر وضعیتی آمادگی لازم رو داریم.
דוקטור מאיר ג'אבד אנפאר, מומחה לאיראן, אוניברסיטת רייכמן, המומחה, הידיעה. תודה רבה לך, דוקטור ג'אבד אנפאר, שאתה איתנו בסבלנות. אז איראן רואה את ראשי שלוחיה מחזירים נשמתם לבורא. לא חושבת שזה מעציב אותם, אבל זה בוודאי גורם למחשבה מחודשת. אתה חושב שישקיעו מחדש באימפריית הפרוקסי, או שהפוקוס עכשיו ילך לגמרי לגרעין?
ימשיכו. הם ימשיכו, הם לא יפסיקו. כן, בהחלט, הם ימשיכו. הם רוצים שהמלחמה הזאת נגד מדינת ישראל, המלחמה שלנו בעזה והמלחמה בלבנון תימשך. רוצים לשחוק את הכלכלה הישראלית, רוצים שלא יהיו טיסות לבן גוריון, הם רוצים שהרוב האנשי מילואים או כל האנשים שלנו בהייטק יהיו בחזית בעזה ובלבנון ולא בעבודה. זה ממש משרת את האינטרסים שלהם שהמלחמה הזאת תימשך, ואני חושב שהם בטח שהם ספגו באמת הפסדים חשובים, אבל זה לא האינטרס שלהם להפסיק עכשיו, ו-sooner or later, את יודעת, חיזבאללה כמפלגה תחזור עם הכוח, מה שיש לו. זה יהיה קשה, אני לא רוצה להגיד שזה קל. כי לבנות את כל הטילים, ומה שאני חייב להדגיש, זה הטילים של חיזבאללה. זה לא שהאיראנים יכולים ללחוץ על כפתור, והנה יהיו טילים חדשים לחיזבאללה. הטילים האלה זה לוקח זמן, הם בנו הרבה שנים, העבירו אותם, והאלה שהצליחו להגיע ללבנון בלי שאנחנו נשמיד אותם, זה נכס אסטרטגי של איראן שאנחנו כנראה ממשיכים כל יום לחסל אותם. אז כן, הם
וזה גם קצת תורת המשחקים כזה, השקעת כבר כל כך הרבה בדבר אחד, אז גם אם זה לא מצליח, אתה לא נכשל, אתה לא פתאום תעבור לנתיב השקעה אחר, כבר השקעת, נכון? אבל בינתיים אנחנו גם רואים את הבליץ המדיני הזה עם מסרים על הפסקת אש, אני לא אגיד בשם לבנון, אבל עבור לבנון, וזה יוצר תרעומת פנימית בביירות, על ריבונות, על פטרונות, דברים שידענו, אבל פתאום הכל צף. זו מהמורה בדרך או איזה משבר רציני יותר?
את יודעת למה הם פתאום מדברים ככה על לבנונים? כי אדון נסראללה אינו יותר שם. לפני נגד האיראנים ככה. אני חושב שאנחנו החלשנו את חזבאללה, וכל ההפסדים של חזבאללה זה נותן יותר תעוזה ללבנונים לדבר ולאתגר ולערער את חזבאללה, שהם שם כמו בובות של איראן, ממש בובות של איראן. הם מתנהגים ככה ומסכנים את האינטרסים הלבנונים. אני בטוח, סביר להניח שיש הרבה מדינות בעולם שתומכים בפלסטינאים ומרגישים שבסדר מה שקורה לפלסטינאים לא הוגן, אבל יש מעט מאוד מדינות שמוכנות לשרוף את הבית שלהם בשביל הפלסטינאים, להפסיד את הכל. אבל שאנחנו המדינות היחידות במזרח התיכון שמוכנות לעשות דבר כזה, זה מדינות תחת השפעה של איראן. למה? כי האיראנים נכנסים למדינות האלה, בונים שם מיליציה שיותר חזקה מהצבא של המדינה, והאיראנים ממשיכים לאתגר את ישראל וגם לאתגר את הריבונות של המדינות איפה שיש להם פרוקסי.
אז אתה יודע, מאיר, אנחנו לא כל כך אוהבים לעשות הקבלות בינינו לבין אויבינו, אבל יושב עכשיו איראני ערב שבת בביתו, הוא מדליק את הטלוויזיה, הוא רואה פאנל כזה יושב ומדבר על התקיפה הישראלית שבה, מתי תבוא, לפני הבחירות בארצות הברית, אחרי הבחירות, מה ביידן יעשה, לא יעשה, כן, זה מעסיק אותם ברמה הזו?
יש אנשים אפילו עושים את זה באינסטגרם. באינסטגרם האיראני הוא מדהים. באמת חייב לתת קרדיט. יש אנשים שם שמגיע להם ערוץ בטלוויזיה, כל כך מצחיקים, באמת מוכשרים, מדהים. יש מישהו עשה, אני יכול אפילו לחפש את זה, שהוא כבר לא יודע איך ללכת. למה? כי הוא מאז שהאיראנים תקפו עד עכשיו, הוא יושב מול הטלוויזיה ומחכה
ומחכה.
אז בטח שזה מדאיג את העם, הם ממשיכים עם החיים שלהם, אבל זה מדאיג אותם, בהחלט שזה מדאיג אותם. כי יש כל מיני אתגרים, אינפלציה לפחות 45%, יש בעיה של הבצורת, יש בעיה של הפסקות חשמל. יש הפסקות חשמל בעיר הבירה של איראן, בטהרן, שיש לפחות...
מה שנקרא החיים עצמם. כן, גם זה קורה בין המתנה למתקפה שהיא בתגובה, לתגובה ההיא, לזה, אף אחד כבר לא יודע מי מגיב למי. אז דוקטור מאיר ג'אווד אנפאר, הכוננות באיראן גם היא נוכחת מורגשת לקראת פעילות ישראלית, וגם מטהרן רואים את הלוחות הטקטוניים של המזרח התיכון משתנים. תודה רבה רבה. דוקטור ג'אווד אנפאר על זמנך. תודה. חברים כאן באולפן, אז אנחנו נחזור קצת על אותה